Chapter 1131. After being sad for an entire night, Shishi's mood was much better the next day after her father's persuasion. When she was eating breakfast in the morning, she had a white beard because of Tong Tong drinking milk. Shishi laughed for a long time because of this. Of course, she didn't remember that she had such a silly and cute appearance before. Today, Huijia Primary School was quiet because the children had already been given a holiday yesterday. Other than the teachers who came back to grade the papers, the other children didn't need to come back to school. In addition, the teachers and the school administration were still busy preparing for the New Year's enrollment speech and entrance exam. Of course, this was also something that would happen this weekend. In contrast, Huijia Primary School's campus had lost its usual hustle and bustle. It was as quiet as an ordinary Jiangnan park. However, Shi and the other children of the first grade class 3 still gathered at school. After all, they didn't want to send Xiaoye away last night, so teacher Li Rulin had to arrange it for today. At this moment, they were in the classroom, lining up to say goodbye to Xiaoye. Shi, why aren't you sad anymore? I still want to cry. Lu Xiaoyu's eyes were red as she said to her deskmate. Shi wasn't sad, but her expression was a little serious. It's not that I'm not sad, but my papa said that it's a good thing that Xiaoye left us. Because it wants to go back to its papa and mom. Xiaoye also has a father and a mother? Lu Xiaoyu's little mouth was as round as an egg in surprise. Yes. Shi followed suit. Just like how her father enlightened her yesterday, she started to enlighten Lu Xiaoyu. It had to be said that Shi's words still had a certain weight in Lu Xiaoyu's heart. After a while, Lu Xiaoyu finally felt relieved. Okay, we should be happy for Xiaoye. When the two girls went to say goodbye to Xiaoye, they didn't cry like class leader Chao Rolin and took off their glasses. They sincerely hugged the birdcage and whispered a lot to Xiaoye. Xiaoye, when you go home and see Papa and Mom, you must also miss me. I'll miss you too. Xiaoye, you will come back to see us, right? I cried last night. Xiaoye, did you cry? If you meet a bad guy, you must fly very, very high. Don't get hurt again. If it's as high as a plane, I won't be able to catch it. Yes. Hee. Although the children were still reluctant to part, it was close to noon. Li Rulin could only harden her heart and ask them to set off to send Xiaoye off. A group of children crowded around teacher Li, who was carrying a birdcage, and came to the hygiene area of their class, a corner of the small square, where they met Xiaoye for the first time. It was the place where teacher Zhao met them with the injured Xiaoye. They were ready to release Xiaoye. Let's say goodbye to Xiaoye again. Li Rulin put the birdcage on the stone table in the school and said softly to Shi and the others, because, when we open the cage later, Xiaoye may fly away. Li Rulin did not think that Xiaoye would be reluctant to part with her. After all, Xiaoye was a wild bird, unlike domesticated pigeons. It had no feelings for humans. Of course, Li Rulin would not tell the children this. Goodbye, Xiaoye. When she said this to her friends, she heard Chao Rolin crying beside her. She was actually a little sad, but she remembered her father's advice to let Xiaoye find its parents. She did not let herself fall into the sad situation yesterday. Moreover, she was holding her small camera and taking pictures of Xiaoye in the birdcage. The little girl, who wanted to leave some memories for Xiaoye, was a little distracted from being sad. It was better to get the pain over with. Li Rulin did not dawdle. She gently opened the birdcage and chirped, trying to call Xiaoye out. Xiaoye probably did not understand what these humans were trying to do. It tilted its head and looked for a while before jumping out. Interestingly, Xiaoye did not fly away immediately like Li Rulin said. It stepped on the stone table and jumped twice, then tilted its head and looked at the humans who were watching it. Xiaoye hasn't flown away yet. Lu Xiaoyu was about to cry, but now she seemed to see hope. She nervously and excitedly tugged at Shi's clothes. But at this moment, Li Rulin reached out and rubbed Xiaoye's long tail. She even hooked the little fella's round little butt. Xiaoye flapped its wings and took a big step forward. As if it felt that its wings were better and found the feeling of flapping its wings, Xiaoya's next step was to flap its little wings and fly up. Wow! Although this action was not considered light, it still caused the children who were watching anxiously to exclaim. Xiaoya flew up. It did not fly away immediately. Instead, it flew to the tree branch above Shi and the rest. As it used its little beak to comb its feathers, it turned its head and chirped a few times. It seemed to be a little reluctant. Li Rulan struck while the iron was hot and said, "Look, Xiaoya is bidding farewell to all of you. It said that it is very grateful for your care for the past few months." Although this was made up by Li Rulan, the first graders were all very naive, including Shi. They all believed Teacher Li's words. Shi's little face even revealed a happy smile. After all, her hard work was acknowledged and thanked by others. This was still very heartwarming. Even though there was still some lingering, Xiaoya was still a wild bird. After chirping twice, it flapped its wings again and flew up high. After a while, it flew past the branches of a few trees and disappeared from Shi and the rest's sight. Shi reluctantly put down the camera and looked in the direction that Xiaoya flew. Her eyes were actually red and she looked very pitiful. But today, the little girl promised her father not to make Xiaoya sad, so she did not cry and was very strong. The boys were fine. Although most of them were a little sad, after Xiaoya flew away, they calmed down. But there were a few girls who were crying. For example, the class monitor, Chao Ruoling, could not help but hug the teacher's leg and sob. "You are all great. Don't be sad. Although Xiaoya flew away, it will still remember how good you are to it." Li Rulan comforted gently. My papa said, Xiaoya went to find its papa and mom." Shi stood up at this moment, her beautiful big eyes shining with a sincere light. "Then wait until next spring. Xiaoya will fly back from a place where it is not cold. It might come back to play with us." "Really?" Chao Ruoling and a few other crying girls looked at Shi in surprise, waiting for her confirmation. "Really?" My papa said. She said firmly. A miracle appeared. With Shi's words, the scene was no longer a chaotic scene of a group of crying children. Instead, Chao Ruoling and the rest surrounded Shi with sadness and joy. They acted coquettishly and wanted Shi to tell them more information. "Let me tell you. Xiaoya also has a papa and mom, because its papa and mom are like chicks, laying eggs and then hatching them." The little girl really explained to her classmates enthusiastically. Chapter 1132. Although she did not cry when she sent Xiaoya off, she was not in a good mood for the next few days. In addition to Xiaoya, it was also because Lan Xian was not at home to play with her. After Lan Xian's summer vacation, she would go back to her hometown with Lan Hao Kai for a week. Originally, Lan Xian also invited Shi to go back with her, but considering the media's annoyance, Lan Hao Kai's inability to take care of her, and other factors, Yang Yi did not let her go. Because of this, she was still angry for half a day. Why was it only half a day? Because when she woke up the next day, the little girl's anger had subsided. Early in the morning, she was full of energy and pestered her father to play table tennis with her. Of course, Yang Yi also wanted to go back to his hometown to visit his family during the summer vacation, but now was not the time. Murphy rested for half a month, and her work arrangements began again. In addition to a concert, there was also the more important finals of I Am a Singer. In addition, Yang Yi also had work to do in the promotion of the movie, so he could only postpone the visit to his hometown until the end of the summer vacation. It was worth mentioning that she had improved rapidly in the past few days, perhaps because she was working hard to play table tennis with her father. Originally, she only knew how to catch the ball in a hurry, but now, she could even hit her father twice. Looking at her long legs running briskly and her thin arms waving the table tennis racket, she was actually playing well. After a few days, when she learned from Lu Weisha that she would be coming to China to play with her, she finally got rid of her previous depression and became happy again. Papa, Lu Weisha said that she will be coming on Friday. The little girl ran downstairs and jumped into her father's arms happily. She smiled and said, Hee, she has already, no, Lu Weisha's papa and mom have already bought plane tickets. This is great. Yang Yi hadn't seen his daughter smile so happily for a long time. He couldn't help but smile and say, "Did you tell Lu Weisha? They don't have to worry about not having a place to stay since Xion's father has prepared a temporary house for them." Some of the villas in this villa district were empty. It wasn't that they couldn't be sold. As the most high-end villa district in Rivertown, it was impossible for the houses here to not be sold. Many rich people in Shanghai came to Jiang City to buy houses because Jiang City was very close to Shanghai. However, Lan Zhao Kai was very shrewd. When the market opened, he only sold half of the villas and kept the other half as reserves. Every year, he sold a few of them sporadically. By doing this, on the one hand, he could limit the number of residents and ensure that the residents who had already moved in could enjoy a better living experience. On the other hand, Lan Zhao Kai also secretly limited the identity and status of the buyers. Occasionally, he could also use this to win favors. Let's not talk about these business matters. Lan Zhao Kai knew that Lan Xian and Shi's kindergarten friends were going to come to China from Sweden. Lu Weisha's father was an executive of Wall Motors, so he generously asked someone to take care of a villa that was originally reserved for receiving guests for Lu Weisha's family to stay in temporarily. "I've already told Lu Weisha." She nodded seriously and smiled at her father. "I told Lu Weisha that you don't have to stay in a hotel. You can stay near my house. In this way we can visit each other." After the little girl finished speaking, her big eyes sparkled with excitement. She half knelt on the sofa, held her father's arm, and begged, "Papa, can we go to Lu Weisha's house to have a look?" Haven't you already seen it?" Yang Yi asked curiously. Because Lu Weisha said that she likes pandas very much, so I want to put the panda doll that I want to give to Lu Weisha in her room." She smiled sweetly, and her eyes were like crescent moons. "Lu Weisha will be very happy when she walks in." Yang Yi understood and said with a smile, "You want to prepare a surprise for Lu Weisha, right?" Yes. Cici quickly nodded her little head. She had such a good idea, so how could Yang Yi not agree? At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when the sun was not so hot outside, Yang Yi set off with Shi. Yang Yi carried big and small bags of things that he wanted to give to Lu Weisha's family. She was also happily holding 2 dolls. One was a single-horned deer with beautiful small horns, and the other was the panda doll that she had mentioned. The little girl bought it from the panda base. It was not very big, and could be considered a mini version of the panda. She bought a lot of them, and they were all gifts for her good friends. How could Tong not follow such a fun thing? The little guy, who was forced by his mother to wear a round sun hat, was also holding a robot that he liked very much. Because he was afraid that he would drop it, he still held his 2 small hands tightly in front of his chest and walked with small steps, humming as he followed behind his sister. It could not be helped. Both of his sister's hands were full, so she could not hold his hand. "Do you want Daddy to carry you?" Yang Yi walked behind the 2 little guys in order to take care of them. He could not help but ask with a smile when he saw that Tong was struggling to keep up. After all, 1 step of his sister's was equivalent to several of his steps. No. Tong's answer was very straightforward, and he did not even pant. However, in order to keep up with his sister, the little guy sometimes had to stop and raise his head strenuously. Only then could he get rid of the sun hat's obstruction and find his sister. Then he laughed happily and jogged after her. Sister. Fortunately, the villa prepared for Lu Weisha's family was not very far away. It was just next to the lakeside greenway where Yang Yi's family often walked. Soon, they arrived at their destination. Yang Yi took out the key to open the door. This villa, which had a special purpose, was not very big. It was smaller than Yang Yi's house, and it only had 2 floors. After entering, they saw that the interior was very clean and had all the basic furniture. After all, it had been used to receive relatively high-class guests in the past, and Lan Zhao Kai had also asked people to take care of the cleanliness in advance. After going upstairs, She opened the door of the room that she had designated as Lu Weisha's bedroom. She excitedly ran to the bedside table and put down the single-horned deer doll that she was holding in her left hand. "Hua Hua lives here," the little girl muttered to herself. "Then the panda will be on the bed. Lu Weisha will definitely love to hug it to sleep." Hua Hua was the name of the deer that she had rescued at her grandfather's house. Now, she had given it to the single-horned deer doll. As she spoke, she took off her shoes and climbed onto the bed. She placed the panda doll on the pillow in the middle of the bed. After looking at it for a while, she smiled with satisfaction and turned around. "Hey, little brother, what are you doing?" She turned around and saw that Tong Tong had placed his robot on the bedside table next to the single-horned deer. She could not help but cry out in surprise. Tong Tong was shocked by his sister's question. The little fellow actually only wanted to imitate his sister and play with her. Now, he looked at his sister in confusion and stood there helplessly. "I know." She giggled and said, "Little brother, you also want to give Sister Lu Weisha a surprise." Tong Tong was really confused by his sister's surprised look. He blinked his big eyes and looked at his sister in confusion. "Let me help you," she said enthusiastically. She slid down from the bed and picked up Tong Tong's robot. She walked to the bedside table on the other side. The room's furniture was a bit like a hotel apartment, and carefully placed it next to the table lamp. After she finished placing it, she walked back and looked at it for a while before nodding her head in satisfaction. "Yes, it's symmetrical like this. It looks good." Xiao Pai pouted his little mouth, his little face full of confusion. He simply couldn't understand what his sister was doing. "Is it fun to move things from here to there?" Chapter 1133. When they were about to go back to school to get the student handbook and the final exam results, Lan Xin finally came back. Lan Xin, who had been living in the countryside for a week, was tanned. She used to be a fair and chubby little girl, but now she had become, cough, to save some face for X-Air. The first thing Lan Xin did when she came back was to find Shi. Lan Zhou Kai and Wu Jingjing had just arrived home, but before they could pack their luggage, Lan Xin came to Shi's house with difficulty, carrying a heavy bag of water chestnuts. "Shi, try this. It's super delicious. Hey, my relatives just picked it this morning. You have to eat it quickly. If it's left for too long, it won't taste good." Lan Xin said anxiously when she saw Yang Yi put it on the table in the dining room after taking it for her. Lan Xin was very particular when it came to good food. If it weren't for the worry that it wouldn't taste good if it was left for too long, Lan Xin wouldn't have been so anxious to bring it over for Shi to try. After all, it was so heavy that it took a lot of effort. "It won't taste good if it's left for too long?" Shi asked, puzzled. She felt that it was very strange. Apple, pear, and other fruits, weren't they still edible after being left for too long? Lan Xin nodded her little head vigorously and said seriously, "Yes. When we were in our hometown, we took a boat to a very big lake to pick these. It's the best when it's just picked, but after it's left, it won't taste good anymore. It will turn black." Speaking of which, Lan Xin still had some regrets. She pouted her little mouth and said, Shi, you didn't go to play with me. Now it's a little black, but it's okay to eat it quickly. It's just that, Cici, if you go to my hometown with me, you can eat the most delicious water chestnuts." She looked at her friend enviously. Of course, she wasn't envious of Lan Xin for having fresh water chestnuts to eat. Instead, she was envious of Lan Xin for being able to take a boat to a big lake to play. But my papa and mom are not free. I also want to go and play." Shi's two small hands were tangled in front of her as she said with grievance. Yang Yi had just turned around. Hearing their conversation, he shook his head and smiled. He didn't agree to let Shi follow Lan Xin to the countryside to play because of this reason. Lan Zhao Kai said that he wanted the children to see the big scene of water caltrop harvesting. Although Lan Zhao Kai usually trusted Yang Yi and didn't mind letting him take his daughter around the world, Yang Yi didn't trust Boss Lan. Or more accurately, he didn't trust the villagers in Lanzhou Kai's village. Take a boat to a deep lake to play? Yang Yi didn't want his daughter to take this risk when she was out of his sight. He couldn't follow. If something happened, it would be too late for Yang Yi to rush over. However, Yang Yi didn't say this in front of the children. Even when he told Lanzhou Kai about his worries, he didn't say it directly. Instead, he used a more tactful excuse. Xian Air is so thoughtful, sending the water caltrops over in such a hurry. Yang Yi said with a smile. But the water caltrops are actually not as delicious as stir-fried vegetables. We can stir-fry the water caltrops with chives or use streaky pork to make a very fragrant and delicious water caltrop braised pork with brown sauce. Fatty but not greasy braised pork with brown sauce. Once you bite into it, you'll be filled with the fragrance of meat. Actually, Yang Yi didn't really want the children to eat the water caltrops raw. This was because it was said that raw water caltrops, especially the surface, had parasites, so it was best to cook them before eating. This was also why after he received the water caltrops, he put them on the table in the dining room and didn't bring them to the coffee table for the little girls to peel and eat. As Yang Yi described the deliciousness of the braised pork with brown sauce, he stole glances at Lan Xian. He was obviously doing this on purpose. Of course, if it's not urgent, we can also make a water caltrop cake. Lan Xian's eyes were shining and her saliva was dripping. Finally, she couldn't hold it in anymore and said loudly, I want to eat, I want to eat, I want to eat, I want to eat red water caltrop braised pork. Papa Yang, let's make red water caltrop braised pork with brown sauce, okay? Stir-frying and what not. Forget it. Besides, why hadn't she eaten red water caltrop braised pork with brown sauce in her hometown? Someone had stir-fried water caltrop with beef, but it wasn't delicious. Lan Xian was used to eating delicious food made by Papa Yang, so her mouth was already picky. Yang Yi laughed and said, Then Xian Air, you and she can play at home first. This afternoon, we'll have lunch at our house. It was almost lunchtime. Lan Zhou Kai and the others probably just came back and didn't have time to cook. Yang Yi planned to call Lan Zhou Kai and Wu Jingjing over, but this matter didn't require Lan Xian to make the trip. Yang Yi could just call her later. Okay. Lan Xian nodded her head excitedly. The two little girls were playing downstairs. When Murphy saw this, she patted Tong Tong's butt and told him to go play with the two older sisters. She went into the kitchen and stood next to Yang Yi. Is this water caltrop? I've heard of it a few times, but this is the first time I've seen it. Murphy said in amazement, like a curious baby. Really? You haven't seen it before? Yang Yi asked with a smile. He had forgotten that in the end, it was still his fault. Who asked Yang Yi to never buy water chestnuts to eat? In fact, in the market of Zhongqing, water caltrops were a relatively common ingredient. Murphy didn't care. She picked up a water caltrop and said with a smile, Look at this water caltrop. Doesn't it look a bit like a cow's horn? And it looks especially like the horns of the African buffalo in the animal world. It didn't look like one now, but when it was dried and tanned, it would look even more like one. Yang Yi smiled and said, Are you trying to say that every time a water caltrop is produced, an African buffalo will lose its beloved horn? Please spread the word and let more people know that if there is no trade, there is no harm. Murphy nearly couldn't keep up with Yang Yi's train of thought. She was stunned for a long time before she reacted. She laughed so hard that tears were about to fall. She hammered Yang Yi's arm with her fist and giggled, Wow, how are you so talented? You can even make up something like this. Then you don't know how much the netizens in the previous life were like. Yang Yi was so proud that he even sang the classic, Picking Red Caltrops. The two of us rowed the boat, plucking red caltrops, 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 plucking red caltrops. This song was originally a duet between a man and a woman. Yang Yi pinched his throat and pretended to be a woman for a while, and then sang very boldly. He was like a young gentleman who was going to pick red caltrops with a girl. But under Yang Yi's superb control of singing, it was actually quite good. Yang Yi sang while holding Murphy's waist, who was laughing so hard that she couldn't stand properly. Just like rowing a boat, he rocked. The two of them flirted shamelessly in the kitchen. They didn't know that outside the kitchen, Shi and Lan Xin had encountered a small problem. Chapter 1134. At this moment, in the living room, Shi and Lan Xin were looking at Tong Tong, who seemed to be confused as well. The story started a few minutes ago. Tong Tong was only 1.5 years old, so he was very forgetful. That day, he accompanied his older sister to walk around the small villa. Then, his older sister held his little hand and brought him home. He seemed to have forgotten something. It was also after a few days that little Momo realized that her favorite robot seemed to have disappeared. The robot that could transform and sing was Tong Tong's favorite. The remaining robots were not the one he was looking for today. There was a basket full of robots, cars, and trucks. Some of them could transform, and some of them could make a beeping sound when they were pushed. However, there was no robot that could transform and sing at the same time. Tong Tong stuck his little butt out and buried himself in his pile of toys. After searching for a long time, he still could not find the robot. When he raised his head, Tong Tong's eyes were a little confused, and he even looked like he was doubting life. Thus, the scene at the beginning of the story occurred. Tong Tong ran over to his two older sisters. He held one of Shi's fingers with one hand and pointed at his pile of toys with the other. He asked for help. "Where's that? Where's that? Where's that?" Shi and Lan Xin were confused by his words. Tong Tong was dumbfounded. He really did not know how to describe it. The little guy was lacking in vocabulary. He stuttered for a long time, but he still could not say a word. Huawei, what are you talking about? I don't understand," Lan Xin said. The three little guys looked at each other for a while. Tong Tong was so anxious that he was like an ant on a hot pan. He looked at his pile of toys for a while, then raised his head and looked at his older sisters. In the end, Shi and Lan Xin accompanied Tong Tong to his pile of toys. Tong Tong started rummaging through the toys. Lan Xin and she could only squat at the side and watch curiously. Tong Tong picked up a robot and gestured to Lan Xin. Then, he pouted his little mouth and said, "There's nothing, older sister." He wanted to say that his robot was gone, but he just could not express it. However, at this moment, she seemed to understand something. After all, she was his older sister. She raised her eyebrows and pointed at the robot in Tong Tong's arms. She giggled and said, "Tong, little brother, are you looking for a robot?" Xiao Rua nodded hurriedly, then pouted with an aggrieved expression, "Rua wants to play." The next day, Shi and Lan Xin had to go to school to collect their student handbooks. However, Yang Yi was not the one sending them to school today. Lan Hao Kai was free these few days, so he volunteered to send the two little girls to school. Lan Hao Kai and Yang Yi were the same. Usually, when the children went to school, Yang Yi was the one sending them to school most of the time. However, Lan Hao Kai would send them to school on behalf of Yang Yi if he was not busy with work. However, he did not drive himself. There was a chauffeur in the car. "Shall I send you up? Do you have a parent-teacher conference today?" Lan Hao Kai asked with a smile when they arrived at school. No. However, Lan Xion's reaction was very intense. She yelled, "None of the others' fathers went up with us. They only want the children." From the looks of it, Lan Xion's reaction was like that of a rebellious child. She did not want her parents to be involved in her own affairs. However, that was not the case. Lan Xian was just worried that her father would be caught by the form teacher after he went upstairs. Then, he would expose her poor performance. It was like this last year. Teacher Li came to visit and complained to Lan Hao Kai. Lan Xian began a miserable working life. If she did not work hard to earn money, she would not be able to watch TV or eat good food. Lan Xian did not want to be lectured by her father again. Lan Hao Kai, who was originally in high spirits, felt as if he had been splashed with cold water. He could only resentfully stop his footsteps. He sighed, waved his hand at the two girls and said, "Then you two go upstairs by yourselves. Be careful. I'll wait for you at the school gate." She watched as the two young ladies ran happily towards their classmates with laughter, like the wind. Poor Boss Lon could only regretfully return to the car and listen to music while waiting for them to come back. However, Lan Hao Kai's business was so big that it was impossible for him to be completely idle. After a while, he received a call from one of his subordinates. They had something to ask him. Not long after he put down his phone, he received another call from a business partner. It was nothing important. The two of them were just discussing the arrangements for playing golf this weekend. Lan Hao Kai's phone calls came one after another. He was so busy that he saw Shi, Lan Xin, and two other little girls from their class walking out of the school gate. When he finally snapped back to reality, almost an hour had passed. "Bye, little you, bye, Chan. Shi waved and said goodbye to her and Lan Xion's deskmate with a smile. Then, she and Lan Xion went back to Papa Lan's luxurious MPV. Lan Hao Kai put away his phone and jumped down to open the door for the two little girls. He asked cheerfully, "How was your final exam?" Shi, you didn't forget to write your name this time, did you?" He had not gotten into the car yet, so he did not see the two little girls looking at each other. Two pairs of cute eyes sparkled, communicating with their eyes. After Lan Hao Kai sat down in the front passenger seat, Shi said unhappily, "Papa Lan, I didn't forget to write my name, but I didn't do well on the exam." Before she could complain about how she did, Lan Hao Kai quickly comforted her, "It's okay if you didn't do well on the exam. You just have to work harder next time. Shi, your grades are usually good, and you're a smart child. It's normal for you to perform poorly on an exam, unlike Xin Air. She didn't do well on the exam because she wasn't smart to begin with, and she didn't study hard. You need to have a little confidence in yourself." However, Lan Xion was not going to let him say that. She shouted, "Papa, who said I didn't do well on the exam? I did really well on the exam this time. I also got 100 in math. And then Teacher Lee said I was still 9th in class." "You did so well." Lan Hao Kai couldn't believe his ears. It was true. Lan Xion did really well this time. Her total score was actually in the top 10 of the class. This time, it was Shi's turn to be unhappy. She pouted and said gloomily, "Ugh, Xin, you're so naughty. We agreed to scare your daddy." "So that's what happened." Lan Hao Kai was stunned for a moment, then he shook his head and laughed. However, even if she failed to scare Papa Lan, wasn't there still Papa Yong? When they got home, Shi threw herself into her father's arms with a sad expression. She didn't say anything, just sobbing with her head down. "What's wrong?" Shi, what's wrong?" Yang Yi was a little surprised. Lan Hao Kai also walked in with Lan Xion. Lan Hao Kai was very cooperative. He sighed, but he didn't explain. He just pretended to be very sad. Lan Xion pouted and ran to the sofa. She hugged Papa Yang's arm and said sadly, "Papa Yang, Shi and I didn't do well on the final exam." "Ugh, I want to cry too." Yang Yi opened his mouth. His expression changed as if he wanted to laugh, but he held it back. In the end, it turned into an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. If you want to act, at least act more realistically. Her crying is full of flaws. It's obvious that she's faking it. Yang Yi complained inwardly. Actually, he was complaining about Lan Xion and her father. When she threw herself into his arms just now, Yang Yi's heart skipped a beat. He thought that something bad was going to happen. However, when he saw Lan Hao Kai's meaningless performance and Lan Xion's tears, he suddenly understood what was going on. However, Yang Yi hesitated and didn't expose them. He just held back his laughter and deliberately held Shi and Lan Xion's hands nervously. He said, "Didn't do well? Why didn't you do well?" "Sigh, but it doesn't matter." Shi Didn't Papa tell you before? If you didn't do well, we shouldn't be discouraged or sad. Cece couldn't hold it in any longer. The little girl raised her head, her hair a little messy because of the torment. There were no tears in her big eyes, but they were watery as she looked at her father with a smile. She twisted in her father's arms and stuck out her little tongue. He, Papa was deceived. I didn't do badly in the exam. Xian Air did super well in the exam, and then I also got the first place. I didn't cry either. Lon Xian also let go of Papa Yang's arm. She raised her head and giggled, showing Papa Yang her face. They seemed to think that their little prank had succeeded, and all of them had smug looks on their faces. Papa, look, I did very well in the exam this time. Teacher Li even praised me. At this time, Cece took out her red student handbook from her small school bag and flipped open the pages with 3 full marks written on them. She nestled in her father's arms obediently and happily pointed them out for him to see. Me too. Teacher Li said that I improved the most. Lon Xian didn't want to be outdone. She showed her student handbook to Papa Yang. Chapter 1135. The 2 young ladies waited and waited, hoping and hoping. Finally, Lu Weisha arrived in front of them on a plane that had traveled halfway across the globe. Yang Yi had secretly speculated that Shi and Lu Weisha had not seen each other for a year. When they met again, would they become more distant? But when he received Lu Weisha at the airport and saw the young lady's behavior, Yang Yi overturned his assumption. Perhaps when they saw Lu Weisha and her parents walking out from the corridor, Shi and Lon Xian were stunned for a moment. But after confirming that it was really her, the 2 young ladies cheered and greeted her. Lu Weisha. Lu Weisha was also pleasantly surprised. She ran over and hugged Shi and Lon Xian. Shi had grown a lot taller this year, but Lu Weisha had also grown taller. Due to genetic factors, she was now 1 or 2 fingers taller than Shi. She was able to hug Shi and Lon Xian. But her personality was not as cheerful as Shi's. She was still the same after a year. She pursed her lips and smiled shyly. The young ladies chattered away, and there was no sense of distance between them at all. Unlike when Yang Yi greeted David with a more formal handshake, David was more familiar with Chinese culture, they looked very cordial. But in fact, they were far less familiar with each other than when David was working in China, where the 2 of them could chat happily over coffee. Perhaps it was because they often video chatted that their relationship was maintained so well. Lon Xian was the same. Shi would often call her to chat with Lu Weisha. It was worth mentioning that Lu Weisha was not as talented in languages as Shi. After wasting a year, Lu Weisha could not remember how to speak Chinese except for some simple greetings. But it did not matter. Shi was proficient in Swedish. Shi did not find it troublesome at all. She enthusiastically translated for Lon Xian and Lu Weisha. Back in the villa area, David and Lu Weisha's mother, Maria, praised Lan Hao Kai's arrangement for them. It's so beautiful. This house is very big and comfortable. I think we will have a very good holiday in China. I'm really grateful to Lon and you, Leon. To say that this small villa was very big was actually not true. Lu Weisha's family owned a large house in Sweden. It could be said to be a mansion. Naturally, this small villa could not compare. But David and Maria also understood that China's national conditions were different. After all, they had lived in China before. Wall Motors rented an apartment for David, so compared to that apartment, this small villa reflected its advantages. They did not have to stay in a hotel for a holiday, but stayed in a more luxurious and spacious villa than a hotel. How could David and Maria not be amazed and grateful? Murphy did not follow them to the airport. She stayed in the villa. At this time, she also came over with Tong Tong and some coffee beans prepared by Yang Yi. The adults were downstairs in the living room, drinking coffee and chatting. The children felt a little bored. Shi winked at Lon Xian and whispered to Lu Weisha for a while. After a while, the girls got up secretly and walked upstairs. They thought that their parents would not notice their movements. How was that possible? However, Yang Yi knew that they should be going up to see the surprise that she had prepared for Lu Weisha, so he did not stop them. Lu Weisha. At percent. On the stairs, she said something to Lu Weisha in Swedish. Then, she turned her head and said excitedly to Lan Xen, "Xer, I told Lu Weisha that you and I have prepared a big surprise for her. We are going to take her to see it now." I've already guessed it. Lan Xen chuckled smugly. But at this time, a childish voice came from behind them, "Sister, sister." She and Lan Xen heard it. They turned around and looked down from the staircase railing. They found that Tong Tong had followed them. It turned out that the little guy did not like to play with his parents. Those adults were very bored, so he followed his sister's footsteps. However, Tong Tong was small and had short legs. He climbed the stairs very slowly. After he climbed 2 steps, he looked up and saw that his sisters had already passed by the corner of the stairs. How could Tong Tong not be anxious? Why didn't my sisters wait for me? Xiao Bai's little mouth pouted in grievance. Fortunately, little Momo's anxious cry still had an effect. Cece glanced downstairs, then ran downstairs in 3 steps, took her brother's hand, and pulled him up together. "Lu Weisha, my brother wants to play with us too. Do you remember him? His name is Momo." She introduced him enthusiastically. I remember him. He is your brother. He was so small back then, but he is all grown up now. Lu Weisha's eyes lit up. She ran over happily and held Tong Tong's other hand as she spoke to Shi. That's right. My brother is already 1.5 years old. He is taller now, and let me tell you, he is so heavy that I can't even carry him. She pointed at Tong Tong as if she was showing off her baby. Her clear and bright eyes were filled with smiles as she spoke. Tong Tong did not understand what his sisters were talking about. He stood there in a daze, but his eyes were wide open as he stared straight at Lu Weisha. In the little fellow's limited memories, he had never seen a little big sister who looked like this. Although her blonde hair was not as smooth as his sister's long black hair, her curly hair gave off a languid and charming feeling. Her fair skin was even more radiant than Sister Xian Air's tan skin. It was as if her body was emitting a faint fluorescent light. Of course, Tong Tong did not think too much about it. He simply felt that this sister's hair was very beautiful. It might be as fragrant as Mom's. He also felt that this sister's appearance was very beautiful. Her 3-dimensional nose and face would leave a deep impression on Tong Tong. What attracted Tong Tong the most was Sister Lu Weisha's eyes. They were not black, but blue. They were as blue as the sky. In Tong Tong's mind, only that pair of blue eyes was left. He was led by his sister, but he kept staring at Sister Lu Weisha. It was as if he wanted to find an answer from Sister Lu Weisha. When they reached the room and heard Lu Weisha's exclamation and Shi's and Lan Xian's bell-like laughter, Tong Tong finally regained his senses. She introduced the items to Lu Weisha. Of course, she also took the trouble to translate for Lan Xian so that Lan Xian could also participate. "I told Lu Weisha, these are all for her. This panda and deer are gifts from me, and this little doll is a gift from you, Xer." She was referring to the Barbie doll that was placed on the bedside table where Tong Tong had placed the robot. Tong Tong was in a hurry to get the robot back, so Shi accompanied him to the villa to get it back. Lan Xian volunteered to fill the hole. She gave the Barbie doll that her mother, Wu Jingjing, bought for her when she went overseas to play and gave it to Lu Weisha. "You have to tell Lu Weisha that this little doll looks like her. That's why I gave it to her," Lan Xian said excitedly. "Wasn't that right? They were both blonde and blue-eyed dolls." "Okay," Shi told Lu Weisha. Lu Weisha looked at Lan Xian in surprise. She ran over gratefully and gave Lan Xian a hug. At this time, Shi started talking to Lu Weisha. Lu Weisha listened in amazement for a long time. Then, she looked at Tong Tong and seemed to find it very interesting. She pursed her lips and giggled. Tong Tong was puzzled by her stare. He just stood by the side and watched his sisters chat. But soon, Tong Tong knew the answer to his question. She eagerly translated for Lan Xian. I just told Lu Wei Sha that it used to be my younger brother's robot. It could transform and sing. I thought he was going to give it to Lu Wei Sha, but later I found out that wasn't the case. Luckily, Xian came back and gave Lu Wei Sha such a beautiful doll. Lan Xian waved her hand generously and said proudly, of course, because I'm also Lu Wei Sha's good friend. Tong Tong looked thoughtfully at his sisters chatting. Later, the three of them climbed onto the bed and sat on the blanket. They played with the three dolls in full swing. I'm so envious. Chapter 1136. Papa, why do we have to go home and let Lu Wei Sha go to sleep? After sitting in the small villa for a while, Yang Yi and Murphy left with the three children. She was a little reluctant, because she had just met her friends and hadn't had enough fun yet. Although the little girl left with her father obediently, she still couldn't figure it out on the way, so she asked unhappily. Because we have to deal with jet lag. Yang Yi held Tong Tong in his left hand and Shishi's hand in his right. He smiled and said, Lu Wei Sha's family just came to China and crossed 7 time zones. Although it's only 10 o'clock now, it's still 3 or 4 o'clock in the middle of the night where they live. It's just the right time to sleep. Ah! Not only Shi, but Lan Xian, who was walking with Shi, was also very confused. They almost simultaneously looked over with confused eyes. Your father is making it too complicated. Murphy saw that Yang Yi's attempt to show off his knowledge was thwarted, so she couldn't help but laugh and say, it's just that they're very tired from the flight and need to sleep. Shi, it's just like when we came back from Grandpa's house, we also need to sleep. I don't need to sleep when I'm on the plane. I've already slept on the plane. Lan Xian shouted, puffing out her small chest. That's still a little different. They've been on this plane for a long time, and they have to change planes in the middle. It's very tiring. Yang Yi also learned to be smart and explained simply, don't worry, we'll invite Lu Wei Sha and her parents over for lunch at noon. It was useless to say so much before, so this sentence was very much in line with Shishi's wishes. Hearing that Lu Wei Sha could come to play again at noon, which was less than 2 hours later, Shishi clapped her hands happily and said, okay. What about me? What about me? Lan Xian asked anxiously. Papa Yang, can I join you for dinner? I also want to play with Lu Wei Sha. You can't. Your family has already cooked rice. Yang Yi was very bad, deliberately teasing Lan Xian. Well, I don't want to eat at home. Lan Xian was immediately unwilling. How could she leave herself alone? The little girl pouted and twisted her round waist. Suddenly, she had an idea. Her eyes lit up and she said, I know. Daddy Yang, everyone can come to our house for dinner. Then, Papa Yang can also come to our house to cook. Oh, what a good plan. Lan Xian's cleverness made everyone laugh. Yang Yi helplessly rubbed Lan Xian's head and smiled. All right, I'm afraid of you. Come to our house for lunch. After returning home, Tong Tong excitedly ran to his toy basket in the living room. He found his favorite robot among the broken mechanical arms. Sister. Tong Tong hugged the robot and ran to the sofa. He pulled his sister's hand and looked at her expectantly. Shi, who was watching TV with Lan Xian, did not know what he wanted to say. She could only follow his hand gesture and jump off the sofa. Who would have thought that Xiao Tianyu was so excited that she pulled her sister's hand and walked out? When Sisi saw this, she hurriedly pulled little Hua Cheng and said, No. You can't go outside to play. Papa said that you can't go outside to play now. Papa will be angry. Murphy heard the noise and walked over from the side hall. She picked up Tong Tong and asked with a smile, Where are you going? You even dragged your sister to do bad things. Your sister is so obedient, so you have to be obedient too. But little rascal didn't mean that at all. He couldn't express himself, so he pointed outside and looked at his mother with a serious look in his eyes. His mouth muttered a lot of words. At this time, Lan Xin felt that she had guessed the answer correctly. She ran over and shouted, "I know. You can't let Tong Tong go outside to play. Look at him holding this toy. He went outside to play and lost it again. Last time, he lost it, so she and I went to look for it." Cici quickly nodded and complained, "That's right. Little brother forgot where he put it. I know about it. Dad told me about it." Murphy smiled and shook her head. She comforted Tong Tong and said softly, "The toy is not important. Safety first." Therefore, Tong Tong's request was misunderstood. Since Lu Weisha's family arrived late at noon, Tong Tong, who usually went to bed on time, could not resist the thick pajamas and missed the opportunity. When he saw the blue-eyed girl again, it was already the next morning. Early in the morning, Lu Weisha, who had recovered from the jet lag, ran over to play with Shi. "Lu Weisha, how about we go to the publishing house today?" Yang Yi smiled and suggested, "I remember your father saying that you like reading very much. When we get there, there will be a lot of good books, and many of them have been translated into English. You can go and take a look and see if there are many children's books that you like." "Publishing house? Is it a bookstore?" Lu Weisha asked innocently. No, a publishing house is not a bookstore. She explained to her friend enthusiastically, "It is much more fun than a bookstore. There are many dolls and books. I like it very much." Cici was right. Ever since the Sahara Publishing House became a benchmark in the field of children's literature publishing, it had also gathered a group of children's literature authors and professional editors. Gradually, its market point was biased towards children's literature. Sahara Publishing House often held salon activities at the publishing house or held reader meetings for its authors. Sahara Publishing House had also been redesigned and renovated. The overall decoration style had become full of children's interest. This was also why Yang Yi felt that the publishing house was more worth it for him to take the children to play instead of spending time in bustling shopping malls and tourist attractions. Going out to play was naturally a very happy thing. Tong Tong was so happy that he almost forgot about his business. He beamed with joy as he followed his mother and watched her pack some of the necessary travel equipment. When they were about to leave the house, the little boy let his sister hold his hand. Wearing brand new shoes, he grinned proudly and revealed a few cute little teeth as he walked into the courtyard. At this moment, he saw Lu Weisha. After seeing her blue eyes a few more times, they were not as attractive as before. However, they had awakened Tong Tong's long-lost obsession. Fortunately, his mother had not come out yet. Tong Tong let go of his sister's hand, turned around, and went back into the house to take out his robot. "Why do we have to take it with us these few days?" Murphy muttered in confusion as she followed Tong Tong out. However, Murphy did not let Tong Tong leave the toy at home. It was only a small robot, so it was fine to take it with him. At this moment, the girls were crowded around Yang Yi's MPV nanny van and were excitedly dividing the seats. Listen to me. It's more comfortable to sit in the middle." Lan Xin shouted loudly as she shared her experience with her friends. She was more sensitive. She waved her hand and said anxiously, "No, only 2 people can sit in the middle. There won't be any seats for Sister Lu Weisha. Xin, can the 3 of us sit in the back together?" "That's fine too." Lan Xin thought about it and realized that it made sense. She nodded her head in agreement. Thus, when Tong Tong followed his mother into the car, his sisters were all crowded in the 3rd row. They were chatting and laughing happily from time to time. Tong Tong stood in the aisle between the 2nd row and the 1st row and looked at his sisters in a daze. "Sit in the safety seat." Murphy wanted to carry the little fellow, but she was rejected. Tong Tong finally remembered his mission. He pushed his mother's hand away and squeezed through the aisle in the middle of the 2nd row. His eyes were bright as he reached out his little hand that was holding the robot towards Lu Weisha. At first, Lu Weisha didn't notice it and just took it subconsciously. Then, she looked at Xiao Ruo in surprise. My little brother gave his robot to you?" She said to Lu Weisha in surprise. She found it unbelievable. I don't know. Lu Weisha looked at Tong Tong worriedly and asked Shi, but will your little brother cry? He seems to like this robot a lot. However, after Shi and Murphy asked a few times, Tong Tong did not have any intention of taking the robot back. He only patted the robot in Lu Weisha's hand and turned his head around happily. It was as though he was worried that Lu Weisha would push the robot back. It seems like he gave it to you temporarily. Lu Weisha, you can hold on to it first. Murphy said to Lu Weisha in English, amused. Lu Weisha fiddled with the robot for a while. When she heard Murphy's words, she whispered a few words in embarrassment. Hua Hua, Sister Lu Weisha wants to thank you for the toy. She likes it a lot. Murphy smiled and translated to Tong Tong, who had just been carried to the child safety seat by his father. It was unknown if Tong Tong understood, but his expression was very happy. He sat on the high child safety seat and kicked his little legs. Murphy was amused when she saw the little guy get what he wanted. She rolled her eyes and waited for the car to drive off. Then, she sneaked up to Tong Tong and whispered in his ear, "You are so stupid. Why don't you learn from your father? Who gives a girl a robot? Next time, you should give her something nice. Even if you secretly give your sister's doll to a female classmate, it's fine." Murphy, who was pretending that her son did not understand, did not know that her son's situation was described by a special term in Yang Yi's previous life, Iron Straight Man. Chapter 1137. Lily, do you want to watch this movie? In an ordinary female dormitory in Jiangqing Media University, He-Min pulled a chair and made a squeaking sound as she moved to Chow Yaoli's side. She excitedly showed her phone to her. Frozen? I know. It's Yang Yi's new movie. Chow Yaoli combed her messy long bangs with her fingers and laughed. But, isn't this an animated movie? It's for the kids. Why do you want to watch it? He-Min was about to speak when Chow Yaoli shook her fair finger and said with a smile, "Don't tell me you went to the cinema just to listen to the song. I heard that the theme song is an English single released by Murphy. Why don't you just buy it and listen to it online?" Hey, who said I just wanted to listen to the song? He-Min pulled Chow Yaoli's hand unwillingly and said, "This movie is very good. It has high ratings online." Moreover, Xiaoya from the dormitory next door went to watch the premiere with her boyfriend in the middle of the night 2 days ago. She said that even the adults were fascinated by it and wanted to watch it again when they were free. Is it really that good? Chow Yaoli looked at He-Min in surprise. She thought that she was already past the age of watching animated movies. If she wanted to watch movies, she should watch literary films. Hey, I don't want to explain to you. I'm going to buy tickets in the Sahara Desert now. Let's go and have a look. He-Min said excitedly, "I just took a look. The cinemas in the city are almost full. It's impossible to buy tickets now. Only the cinemas in our university town have many tickets." Now that the university students were on vacation, only He-Min and Chow Yaoli were left in the university town, not derogatory. Most people were not like He-Min and Chow Yaoli, who had been recommended for postgraduate studies. Everyone was busy reading books in the library and had no time to watch a movie. He-Min did as she said. She quickly bought the tickets. In the afternoon, the two well-dressed girls happily went to the cinema in the university town together. In fact, it was in the commercial street outside the main entrance of the Media University of Jiangqing. They walked hand in hand and arrived in a few steps. Sure enough, the cinema in the university town was deserted. When Chow Yaoli and He-Min arrived, there were only a few people in the huge hall. Other than them and the two front desk staff who were selling tickets, popcorn, drinks, and dolls, there was only a couple sitting by the side, waiting for the movie to start. As the movie started at 4 o'clock, they still had to wait for a while. He-Min and Chow Yaoli held their tickets, carried their bags, and sat by the side. The mischievous He-Min was still restless when she sat down. She stretched out her finger and poked Chow Yaoli's arm. Then, she pouted her lips and signaled to her to look at the couple. Chow Yaoli was about to say something, but He Min quickly signaled her to stop and shook her mobile phone. So, the two of them sat together and kept playing with their mobile phones. They used WeChat to whisper to each other. "Damn girl, you're in love, aren't you? Hurry up and find a boyfriend." Chow Yaoli sent a naughty emoji at the end. "No, Lily, look, where is that man's hand?" He Min typed, beaming with joy, as if she was the one who was talking. "Where is he? Isn't he just hugging his girlfriend? What's so strange about that? You're looking at his right hand, look at his left hand." He Min typed while desperately winking at Chow Yaoli. "Wow, I just saw him putting his hand on his girlfriend's leg. Now, I don't know where his hand is." I saw it." Chow Yaoli's cheeks were slightly red. Lily, guess where it's reaching? Isn't there a poem that says so? In the quiet path of the water, the peach blossoms are thick with dew. Looking for the missing hand, the deer in the depths of the forest. Chow Yaoli pursed his lips and typed rapidly on the screen with his fingers. After a while, a line of text was sent. He Min's eyes immediately widened, and she almost spat out the water she was drinking. She put down the drink bottle and quickly typed, F***CK. You're still the dirtiest, Lily. No wonder everyone says that you're cold on the outside but passionate on the inside. Just as the two girls were laughing and gossiping, there was a sudden commotion outside the cinema. Of course, it was not because someone was causing trouble, but because of the childish voices. It was obvious that a group of children was swarming over. She, is she up there? I don't know either. I want to ask Uncle Xiao Gua, is she up there? Yes, Chi, I've already asked Uncle Xiao Gua about this. Then let's go up. Xinair, I want to compete with you to see who can run up there first. I don't want to compete with you, Chen Shiyun. You can compete with Lu Weisha and Shi. Xiaoyu, Sister Xiaowei, hurry up and come up too. Shi, you can't shout. The cinema is a public place, and you can't be a bad influence on others. You have to take the lead and tell everyone not to make noise and to speak softly. A familiar male voice was lecturing the children. At first, He Min and Chow Yaoli heard the excited voices of the children and thought that they were just the children of the university staff who came to watch a movie. However, when they turned around, they were stunned. Putting aside the large group of children, although there were unfamiliar faces among the adults with the children, the ones who were surrounded by the children were Yang Yi and Murphy. There were also Yang Huan and Guazi who were chatting and laughing on the side. He Min and Chow Yaoli were very familiar with these few people. Even though they didn't really watch the Limit Challenge, they naturally knew about Yang Huan and Guazi because of Yang Yi. Moreover, Yang Huan and Guazi were their schoolmates. How could they not have heard of such famous stars in the same or lower grade in their school? Wait a minute, why are they here? Are they here to watch a movie too? That's right, Yang Yi had brought the children here to watch a movie. In the past, Yang Yi had promised that he would let Shishi invite her friends to watch the blockbuster movie Frozen. Hence, he had organized a small movie-watching activity today. He had asked Cici to gather all her friends and bring them to the cinema near Zhongqing Media University to watch a movie together. It was worth mentioning that Lu Weisha had come at the right time. Frozen was officially released a few days after her arrival. Yang Yi had been busy for the first 2 days of the movie's release. He had to attend the premiere and accept interviews from the reporters, etc. Hence, the movie was scheduled for that day. He had also found out from Guazi that there were fewer people in the cinema in the university town. Hence, he didn't have to worry about too many fans crowding around the cinema and affecting the children's movie viewing experience. However, they didn't expect that there would be only 4 guests in the entire cinema. 2 of them were definitely his and Murphy's die-hard fans. He Min and Chow Yaoli were excited when they saw them. Their WeChat conversations were also flooding the screen. Wow, isn't that Yang Yi? Yeah, and Murphy too. I'm so excited. Lily, do you think we should ask them for autographs? I don't think so. They are taking care of their children. Wouldn't it be embarrassing to disturb them? Chow Yaoli was a well-mannered true fan. If it weren't for a few parents, I would have thought that Yang Yi and Murphy had so many children. Pfft, do you think Murphy is a pig? How could she have so many children? Hee hee, oh yeah, Lily, look at that girl. The girl standing with Guazi. Who is that girl? She is holding hands with Guazi. She should be his girlfriend? They are quite close. Isn't Guazi's girlfriend Yong Huan? Chow Yaoli wasn't as gossipy as he mean, so he asked foolishly. No, they have clarified it countless times. However, this is the first time I've seen Guazi's girlfriend. She is quite pretty, but her skin is a little dark. She might be from our university. Their temperaments are similar. There's such a thing as temperament? Of course. Then, Lily, can you teach me? Is that couple who saw the deer for the first time in Lin Shen from our university? Hee hee, I won't teach you. Soon, Chow Yaoli sent another message. Because I don't know either. Hee hee. The two of them joked around. Chapter 1138. Not to mention the attention of the two passerby girls, the 9 children, including Tong Tong, gathered together was enough to build a food market. After all, it was rare for them to come out and play together. Even Yang Luoqi and Yu Xiaowei, who were usually quiet and shy, had joyful smiles on their faces today. No matter how quiet they were now working hard and actively joining in the conversation with everyone. It was worth mentioning that because Lu Weisha was there, their conversation was a mix of Chinese and English. Shi and Yang Luoqi's English was the best. Yang Luoqi had been learning English from her father, who was a university English teacher, since she was young. She also often had supplementary lessons, so she could communicate normally in English. Lan Xin, Chen Shiyun, and Nan Zhaoyu's spoken English was also good. After all, when they were in kindergarten last year, they often spoke English with Lu Weisha. Now, they could even speak simple conversations. Lu Xiaoyu and Yu Xiaowei were a little more difficult. Even Yu Xiaowei had not reached the level of speaking English. However, they still had Shi to rely on. Lu Xiaoyu and Yu Xiaowei gathered around Shi. They listened hard and asked Shi how to say certain things. Then, they bravely went to communicate with Lu Weisha. This process was painful and troublesome, but communication was full of fun. Under the enthusiasm of Shi, the two girls also spoke English with a strange accent. Not only did they not seem out of place, but their laughter never stopped between them. Don't underestimate these children's language learning ability. At this age, it was the best time to learn something, especially a foreign language. As long as they dared to speak and worked hard to learn, the speed at which they mastered spoken English was probably faster than the speed at which they learned written English in class. This was also why the other parents were reluctant to interrupt the children's chatter before entering the cinema. Yang Luoqi's mother, Wu Yu, Chen Shiyun's father, Chen Guoqiang, Lu Xiaoyu's mother, etc. They were all well aware of this. Not to mention stopping them, they couldn't wait for their children to speak more with this foreign girl. What was interesting was that even little Momo, who couldn't speak fluently and couldn't understand what they were saying, was excitedly squeezed in between his sisters. Although his small stature couldn't reach his sister's line of sight, he still had a sense of participation by looking left and right with his small head. However, after entering the cinema, Yang Yi still had to stand up and maintain order. He couldn't let the children disturb the other guests. Fortunately, he still had a say in this group of children. Or rather, these children liked him very much and were willing to listen to him. Yang Yi stood in front of the group of children who were standing in a row and said softly, "We're in the cinema, so we have to be quiet. We can't speak loudly because this is a public place. If we speak too loudly and disturb others, the security uncle will drive us all out and not let us watch the movie." This was a very scary threat. They all wanted to watch the movie today. If they couldn't watch it, wouldn't it be a disaster? She was very supportive. She looked left and right nervously, as if to see if her friends were speaking. Then, she lowered her voice and translated her father's words to Lu Weisha in English, my papa said that we can't speak loudly. We'll be arrested by the security uncle. Lu Weisha also reacted at this time. She quickly explained to Shi. In fact, her English was a little bit messy, so she simply changed to Swedish. I know, we're like this in Sweden too. We can't disturb others. She seemed to feel that her friend's voice was a little too loud. She quickly raised a finger and looked at Lu Weisha nervously. Lu Weisha quickly covered her mouth and shrank beside Shi. The two girls looked at each other and giggled with their eyes. Yang Yi also took advantage of the time when they were waiting for the movie to start. He took the children to a slightly remote place on the stairs and held a small Q&A with them. At the same time, he taught them some civilized behavior in the cinema. Next, I'll ask some small questions. Let's see if you can answer them, okay? Whoever raises their hand first will be the one to answer. There's no penalty for answering wrong, but there's a prize for answering right. What's the prize? A tong kettle. Yang Yi smiled and asked Murphy to bring over a tong kettle to show the children. Actually, there was nothing special about this kettle. You just had to press a button to open the lid, and there was a straw that you could drink from. It was the same style and function as the ordinary kettles that the children used to drink from. The only difference was that it had a blue plastic base, and there was a white circle printed on the kettle. On the circle, there was a picture of Tong opening its small branches and cheering. Not only that, but it and the other Princess Elsa printed thermos flasks could already be bought on the Sahara Online Mall as a peripheral product of the Frozen animated movie. Yang Yi suddenly came up with the idea of using it as a small prize to motivate the children, and it had a good effect. When Chen Shiyun and the others saw Tong, they were all excited. In order to show off in front of Yang Yi, they pulled their little friends aside and excitedly whispered a few words. Then, they quickly stood back, puffed out their little chests, and held their little hands in front of them, ready to raise their hands to answer at any time. Pay attention, when we answer questions, you can only raise your hands. You can't say, me. Yang Yi demonstrated vividly, making the children giggle. Uncle Yang will be watching you. Whoever raises their hand first will be the one to answer. I guarantee that it's fair. Okay. The girls nodded obediently. Okay, now for the first question. Before Yang Yi finished speaking, he saw the children's faces tensed up nervously. Even Shi, who already had the kettle, opened her beautiful big eyes to participate in the game. Only Tong did not know what his sisters were playing. He squeezed in between his sisters with a confused look on his face. He stuck in front of Shi and behind Lu Xiaoyu, forming a row by himself. Are they playing a game of standing in a row? The little boy looked around in confusion. Yang Yi did not stop and asked the first question. Can we play with our phones while watching a movie in the theater? The group of children raised their little hands in unison. However, there were also some who were too excited, such as Nan Xiaoyu. He raised his hand and tried to squeeze forward, saying, No. Oh, that's not right. I was the first one to raise my hand. She pouted unhappily and said to her father. That's right, Nan Xiaoyu. You can't do this next time. You have to wait until Uncle calls your name. You can only answer when your name is called. Yang Yi smiled and rubbed Nan Xiaoyu's little head and said. Nan Xiaoyu nodded his head in shame. With this mistake as an example, the children knew what to do. Actually, Nan Xiaoyu was right. We can't play with our phones while watching a movie. However, we can answer this question again. Who can tell Uncle why we can't? Yang Yi asked with a smile. However, this question was a bit difficult. There were not many people who wanted to answer it. Only two girls, Yang Luoqi and Shi, rushed to raise their hands. Chi first. Yang Yi called her name. Yang Luoqi opened her little mouth but found that she could not answer. An embarrassed expression appeared on her little face. She also subconsciously rushed to answer. She had not thought of an answer yet. What should she do? Chapter 1139. Actually, Chow Yaoli and He Yamin were secretly worried when the kids appeared. They were afraid that the kids would turn the entire theater upside down. But to their surprise, after Yang Yi and his team appeared, the row of kids obediently followed Yang Yi to a corner. Although there were voices and laughter, the decibel level was not high. It could not even be compared to the sound of the movie's promotional video coming from the LCD advertising screen in the theater. It was at a level that everyone could accept and did not find annoying. "These kids are so well-mannered," He Yamin said to Chow Yaoli on WeChat in surprise. "It's mainly because of Yang Yi's good management." Chow Yaoli replied, "That's true. There's an article on the internet. I forgot where I saw it. It said that Yang Yi is especially good at raising children. She is very good. Although she doesn't appear in front of the media, there's news that she's grades are very good in school. This is the so-called, there are no naughty kids, only naughty parents who don't care about their children. I like such well-mannered people," Chow Yaoli said in a genteel manner. "Haha, let me tell you. I was worried that they were talking too loudly just now, but now I'm very curious. I really want to know what game they are playing." They weren't playing any game. It was just a simple quiz competition. Then, a cute little girl was caught trying to answer, but she didn't have a good answer. Young Luochi stuttered for a while, but because she was getting more and more nervous, her mind went blank. She didn't know how to answer. Her face was red, and she stood there at a loss. Yang Yi couldn't bear to see her like this. He was about to help the little girl. But at this time, young Luochi's friends saw the situation and enthusiastically extended a helping hand. "Chi-Chi, you said that because we are watching a movie, we can't look at our phones." Chan Shiyun whispered. Yes. Nan Xiaoyu quickly nodded. She blinked her eyes and came over from behind. She enthusiastically whispered to young Luochi, "Because it's dark in the movie. You can't look at your phone when it's dark. Papa said that if you look at your phone with the lights off, you'll hurt your eyes." Several of young Luochi's friends gave her ideas. Yang Yi was a little touched by their enthusiasm to help. Finally, after being prompted by her friends, young Luochi gave the answer shyly. However, even with the wisdom of so many stinking cobblers, Yang Yi still didn't get the main point right. It was just that Yang Yi's questions weren't meant to make things difficult for these kids. So he smiled and said, "Chi-Chi is right, and you all said it very well too. In order to protect our eyes, we can't read books or use our phones or watch TV in the dark. But I would like to add that you all have to remember that you can't look at your phone in the cinema, because if you look at your phone, it will affect other people watching the movie. Sometimes it's because of the light from your phone, and sometimes it's because of the sound from your phone. For example, if we are watching a movie and the movie is very exciting, and an uncle's phone suddenly rings in front of us, and he makes a call there, will we be affected? Won't we be unable to hear the sound of the movie? Don't you all agree?" Yang Yi talked a lot, but the kids didn't feel annoyed at all. They listened thoughtfully and nodded seriously. When Yang Yi simply translated to Lu Weisha in Swedish, Chan Shiyun couldn't help but mutter and whisper to her friends about her experience. She, let me tell you, I'm super unhappy. Because when I'm watching TV, my dad sometimes calls, and it affects me watching cartoons. Then Uncle Chen can't play with his phone." She agreed with her friends with a sense of justice. "Isn't that right?" Chen Shiyun pouted. After Yang Yi finished explaining, under Yang Luochi's expectant gaze, he smiled and said, "Although Chi-Chi didn't answer the question on her own this time, it's all my fault for not explaining the rules clearly just now. Therefore, the reward for answering this question should still be given to Chi-Chi." Although Yang Yi said that he didn't have a ready-made Sprite bottle to give her and that he would give it to her after the movie, Yang Luochi was still very happy. She giggled and turned around to hug Shi and the others, sharing her joy with them. Of course, the other friends could only look at her enviously, including Lu Weisha. They were all eagerly waiting for Yang Yi to ask the next question. Before we ask the next question, let's talk about the rules again. You have to answer the question on your own. If you can't answer the question after raising your hand, you can't ask for the opinions of other children. Yang Yi made it clear to the children this time. Suddenly, Nan Zhaoyu and Lon Xian's little faces revealed regretful expressions. They seemed to have wanted to learn from Yang Luoqi and take advantage of the loophole. After a few rounds of questions, Yang Luoqi, Shi Shi, Yu Xiaowei, and a few other girls who reacted faster had already received their rewards. Lu Weisha also couldn't compete with the other children because of the language barrier. Yang Yi asked her a question alone, and Lu Weisha answered it, so she also received a reward. Now, they couldn't continue to participate in the small competition, so they could only stand aside and watch. At this time, Ding Xiang and Guazi came over with a few buckets of popcorn. In fact, Yang Yi had noticed that Ding Xiang was more attentive. Although she had gradually gotten used to working for Yang Yi as a manager and organizer of the Public Welfare Foundation in the rural areas of the Sahara, she still didn't put on airs. Like the waitress Ding Xiang, she carefully helped Yang Yi, Guazi, and other uncouth people deal with some details. It was just like buying popcorn and drinks. Even when they were about to enter the theater to watch the movie, the children would still clamor to buy them. However, Ding Xiang had already thought of this in advance. She brought Guazi with her to the front desk to buy snacks and drinks for everyone. Behind them, Yang Huan was also helping. She asked the waiter to lend her a basket so that she could carry it to give out drinks to the children. Seeing that there was food and that Shi and the others had already gotten it, Lon Xian, who was standing in the crowd waiting for an answer, became anxious. She jumped up and down and asked excitedly, Shi, leave some for me. Don't finish it all. Xian, don't worry. Ding Xiang couldn't help but chuckle and say, I'll give it to you after you answer the questions. 1 bucket per person. Wow. Do you have any cool potatoes? I want some cool potatoes, and I also want some popcorn. The cool potato and onion flavor is super delicious. Lon Xian begged as she looked at Ding Xiang with her big, watery eyes. Cool potato? I don't think there's any here. I'll ask around for you. Ding Xiang shook her head with a smile. Lon Xian was even more motivated now that there was food to eat. She stood there eagerly, ready to snatch the chance to answer the question. Yang Yi saw this and immediately had an idea. He smiled and said, Since there's popcorn to eat, let's ask a question about popcorn, okay? Lon Xian's eyes lit up and she nodded excitedly. Listen carefully. Yang Yi said, We can eat popcorn when we watch a movie, but after the movie, what should we do with the popcorn in the paper bucket? After the questions were asked, the children began to raise their hands to answer. As expected, Lon Xian was the first to answer. She excitedly puffed out her little chest and raised her chubby little hands high. Xian is the first. You say it. Yang Yi smiled. We can take the popcorn home and continue to eat. Lon Xian said excitedly. Yang Yi was stunned. This little girl didn't play by the rules. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, But what if you've already finished the popcorn? Lon Xian pouted and said, But that's the second question. Yang Yi was defeated by her. He was about to organize his words, but at this time, Lon Xian waved her hand generously and said casually, But I know how to answer this question too. I'll put the popcorn in the paper bucket in the trash can. There's a trash can in the movie theater. I know all about it. I've eaten it with my dad before, not watched a movie. Okay. Xian, you've made everyone look at you differently today. When Yang Yi heard Lon Xian's answer, although he felt that Lon Xian's naughty words were really asking for spanking, but he was still infected by Lon Xian's cheerful smile. He couldn't help but reach out and rub Lon Xian's little head. He smiled and said, Okay, you answered this question very well. You can go to the side and wait to receive the prize with Shi. Yay! Lon Xian jumped up in joy. Her chubby little body actually gave off the feeling of being as light as a swallow. Xian, you're also super awesome. She cheered for her little friend. However, Lon Xian didn't have time to hug Shi. She looked around in high spirits and said, Hey, Sister Ding Xiang, I want to eat cool potatoes. Chapter 1140. Actually, they did not have to wait too long before the movie theater informed them to enter. Yang Yi hurriedly asked Nan Xiaoyu, who was at the back of the line, a very simple question. Then he smiled and waved his hand, gesturing for the children to get ready to enter. It was time to watch the movie. The little guys couldn't wait to line up at the front of the line, each holding a paper bucket of popcorn, eating it while talking excitedly with their little friends around them or exuberantly exchanging glances with them. Their parents helped to hold their drinks. After all, their small hands could not hold so many things. Not to mention Xiao Ruo, he could only eat and drink with his sisters. The little guy followed Shi Shi and Lan Xian to the front of the line. Shi Shi was followed by Yu Xiaowei and Lu Weisha. It was worth mentioning that because their father forbade them from letting Tong Tong eat popcorn, Tong Tong could not count on his sister. He could only look at sister Lan Xian and wait for her to give him a cool potato. Popcorn was easy to choke on, and Tong Tong was too small to eat. However, cool potato was fine. It was so long and thick, and it was fluffy and crispy. Tong Tong could eat it without a problem. Lan Xian stretched the paper bucket in front of Tong Tong's face. Tong Tong beamed with joy as he happily grabbed 2 fries from Sister Xian. He held one in each hand and started to gnaw on it while drooling. Lan Xian's mouth did not stop moving. She also ate along with Tong Tong. Before the movie started, there were only half of the fries left in her paper bucket. She did not eat so quickly. She was busy talking. Just a moment ago, She was still happily whispering to Lu Weisha and Yu Xiaowei. They were all very busy. It wasn't easy for her to stop and wait for her father to check her tickets. Now, her big, crystal-like eyes fell on her younger brother, who was happily eating French fries with Lan Xian, and she finally came to her senses. The little girl generously stretched her paper bucket in front of Lan Xian and giggled. "Xian, since you gave your cool potato to my little brother, I'll give my popcorn to you too." She might have been influenced by her father for a long time. Perhaps, in her heart, she felt that Tong Tong was under her protection, so they should share the joys and sorrows together. However, Lan Xian unexpectedly waved her hand and refused. She wiped her mouth a little proudly and said to Shi, "No need, hee. Papa Yang just told me that Sister Ding Xiang bought an extra set of popcorn for Tong Tong. Then I can eat Tong Tong's popcorn too." The 2 little girls chatted happily. However, Shi inadvertently raised her head and saw that 2 very good-looking older sisters, who had already walked past the ticket check, were standing not far from the entrance of the inner hall. They were sizing them up with interest. Shi blinked her big eyes and looked at them in a daze. In the end, the 2 older sisters covered their mouths and laughed. They gathered together and whispered to each other. At this time, the little girl came to her senses. She looked a little shy. She pursed her lips and ran to her father with a faint smile. "Papa, Papa." Shi tugged at her father's clothes. Yang Yi was still watching Ding Xiang check the tickets. They had more people. Ding Xiang took out a large stack of movie tickets from her bag, and the ticket checker still had to tear it up for a while. In fact, other people also recognized Yang Yi and the others. They were afraid of troubling Yang Yi and causing unnecessary public opinion, so they said that they didn't care and let Yang Yi and the others go in to watch the movie. However, Yang Yi considered that these girls were working part-time, and they were now public figures. They had to pay attention to their image, so he followed the procedures. Being called by Shi, Yang Yi took the time to turn around and asked the little girl with a smile, "What's wrong?" "Papa, look over there. 2 older sisters are looking at me." She took her father's hand and shyly twisted her little butt. She raised her little head and giggled. "Looking at you?" Yang Yi was still vigilant. He didn't take it lightly because she said that they were older sisters. He frowned and turned his head to look. There really were 2 girls. He had seen them before, and they were sitting quietly at the table on the other side. However, now that the 2 girls saw him looking over, they were embarrassed and quickly turned their heads to go into the theater. She was still worried that her father wouldn't believe her, so she quickly stood on tiptoe, rubbed her father's arm and said, "It's true. They've been watching for a while." Yang Yi actually understood what was going on. The two girls probably recognized them, so they stopped. However, he still appreciated such fans. They just watched from afar and didn't come to disturb them. However, Yang Yi didn't plan to tell Shishi the truth. He smiled and said to the little girl, "They probably think that you're very beautiful, so they're looking at you." When she heard her father's words, her eyes seemed to burst with joy. She was just short of saying happily, "I think so too." Of course, she still felt a little embarrassed. She only pursed her lips and giggled, but then she shook her little head and retorted, "Of course not. Lu Weisha, Chi-Chi, Sister Xiaowei. They're all so beautiful too. They're beautiful in their own way, and you're beautiful in your own way." Yang Yi smiled and said, "He, that's true." The children sat in a row by themselves, while the adults sat behind them. Guazi and Ding Xiang sat in the row above them. Sadly, Yang Huan didn't want to be the third wheel, so she sat across the aisle. She even found an excuse, saying that there were so many empty seats in the cinema, and it would be a waste if she didn't sit there. Sitting there, she could experience the feeling of having a small piece of the cinema to herself. Of course, everyone's attention was still on the movie itself. At the beginning of the movie, the beautiful snowflakes formed, the beautiful falling scenery, and the melodious operatic voice attracted the attention of all the audience present. Not only the children, but also the parents and a small number of students in the audience were attracted by the big screen. Chow Yaoli watched the movie in amazement, but she preferred the music in the background. After all, the domestic animation in this world was really good. With the support of the copyright protection policy and Yang Yi's continuous investment, the works made by Mantis Shrimp, a Chinese animation company, were even more amazing than the animations made by Yang Yi in his previous life, who claimed that she used her head to make the CG and her feet to make the game. Is this the legendary, first impressing others with a show of strength? Chow Yaoli watched the movie with great appreciation, especially when she heard the songs sung by the ice gatherers as they worked. She became more and more emotional. "I thought that Murphy's song was the only song in this animated movie, but now it seems that there are many other songs that are very nice to listen to. Did Yang Yi write it himself?" She guessed right. It was indeed written by Yang Yi. Originally, Yang Yi had planned to let the movie's soundtrack experts be in charge of this aspect, but after selecting a few, he found that the works of those experts did not satisfy him. It was far from the original feeling. So, Yang Yi rolled up his sleeves and went to work. It was worth mentioning that these songs were all composed by Yang Yi. Although they were influenced by the original version, in order to conform to the Chinese context, Yang Yi almost rewrote the songs himself and added lyrics that could be sung like an opera. 2 years ago, when he listened to the music in Jiangchuan and went back to study it repeatedly, it was effective. Even Chow Yaoli, a top student in music, could not help but want to give Yang Yi a thumbs up when she heard it. Of course, Chow Yaoli was probably the only one who put most of her attention on the soundtrack when watching a movie. He Yamin, who was beside her, was watching the movie with great interest. Her eyes fell on Christopher, who looked like a little boy. "This little boy is quite cute. Is he the main character?" He Yamin guessed in her heart. Chapter 1141. In the eyes of the children, Kristoff was not the main character. Even if he was cute, could he be as cute as the little reindeer that loved to eat carrots and interact with him intimately? When the little reindeer appeared, she and her friends couldn't help but cry out in surprise and joy. Fortunately, they didn't start chatting excitedly. Maybe it was because they remembered Yang Yi's questions about the ethics of cinemas, or because they were too busy watching such a lively and interesting animated film to talk. Of course, we didn't know what the other children were thinking. We only knew that she didn't say anything because she firmly remembered that her father had told her not to whisper to each other when watching a movie. Talking would affect other people's enjoyment of the movie. But she really wanted to say something. "Tell Lu Weisha." The little girl moved her little butt and turned her head to look at Lu Weisha beside her. She thought to herself, "This little reindeer is different from the one I gave you. But I still have this little reindeer. I'll show it to you when we get back." Not only did she want to tell Lu Weisha, but she also wanted to discuss the plot with her friends. Although she hadn't seen it yet, she knew the development of these characters by heart. For example, next, when the cute Anna appeared, she ran to play with Sister Elsa. She was worried and wanted to tell her friends that Sister Anna would be accidentally frozen by Sister Elsa. Next, when Anna and Sister Elsa made a snowman, the snowman had a carrot stuck in it, and it looked like Snow Bow. She was a little worried that some of her friends didn't recognize it. In fact, they all cried out in surprise, but they couldn't talk. Fortunately, Cece's discomfort didn't last for too long. Because after that, before little Sister Anna was frozen, they started to play ice magic in the castle. The gorgeous ice magic was displayed on the big screen, and Cece was surprised to find that the scene before her eyes was much more exciting than what she had imagined. Especially when thousands of ice crystals burst out like bright stars and sprinkled down slowly. The whole palace was covered in ice and snow. For a moment, the scene on the big screen was beautiful. Wow! The little girl saw Anna holding Snow Bow and sliding on the ice with the help of Elsa's ice magic. She couldn't help but cry out in surprise, as if the scene she had dreamed of had come true. She was so excited that her eyes were sparkling. The little girl didn't care about the words in her heart. She stared at the movie that was gradually unfolding in front of her like a picture and was gradually intoxicated by it. So what if she knew the plot? Just the graphics of this animated film alone were enough to amaze anyone. Interestingly, Cece had also forgotten about the plot at this moment and began to worry about Anna's injury. Every child's heart clenched when they saw that Anna was injured. Yu Xiaowei and Yang Luoqi clasped their hands in front of their chests, while Lu Weisha grabbed onto the armrest of the chair and nervously looked at the big screen, her eyes filled with worry. However, some children expressed themselves in a different way, such as Lan Xian. She widened her eyes worriedly, but her mouth was still chewing on the popcorn. It seemed that the more nervous she was, the happier she ate. Needless to say, the popcorn that Lan Xian was holding was Tong Tong's. The bucket of Ku Yatu that she shared with Tong Tong was now in Yang Yi's arms. Of course, Yang Yi wasn't eating it himself. He was holding it for Murphy. Murphy was holding Tong Tong. The little guy loved eating the onion-flavored Ku Yatu, but Murphy didn't want him to eat too much. She didn't want him to cause a scene in the movie theater. Therefore, she asked Yang Yi to hold it to the side so that Tong Tong wouldn't look at it. If he remembered, she would give him another Ku Yatu. If he couldn't remember, just like now, Tong Tong's attention was attracted by the exciting movie. Although he may not be able to understand the meaning of the plot, but in this movie, there are endless magical creatures in the front layer, enough to dazzle Xiao Qianni. Suddenly, many round stones rolled down from the empty deep valley. After a while, they transformed into a group of goblins with rock-colored skin and moss-colored clothes, just like Tong Tong's robot. How could Tong Tong not be surprised by such mysterious creatures? How could he not be fascinated by the big screen? He even forgot to eat his French fries. Luckily, he didn't have to sit with Sister Xian, Chao Yaoli, and He finally understood why Xiao Ye, who was in the dormitory next door, had a strong desire to recommend this animated movie after watching it. It turned out that this animated movie wasn't only for children, but also for big friends like them. Especially for someone like Chao Yaoli, who was very picky about her viewing experience. Even she felt that the plot of this animated movie was very exciting. Although it still couldn't get rid of the plot of the villains having evil intentions, and the beautiful little princess and the grassroots male protagonist successfully turning the tables, this plot had always been popular since ancient times. This kind of plot, with the complicated relationships between the characters, the exquisite character designs, and the wonderful animation, was still able to make people unable to stop watching it. Chao Yaoli was immersed in the movie until the scene of Elsa trekking alone on the snowy mountain peaks appeared. The familiar piano music played, and Chao Yaoli suddenly came back to his senses. His body couldn't help but tremble as he looked at the big screen in surprise. Let It Go. The name of this song flashed through Chao Yaoli's mind. He had heard that Murphy had used this song for a long time, and she had been looking forward to it. But on the screen, when Princess Elsa began to sing, Chao Yaoli couldn't help but tremble again. He turned his head in surprise and looked at Murphy, who was sitting behind and laughing happily with Yang Yi for some reason. It was indeed Murphy singing, but why was it in Chinese? Wasn't "Let It Go" in English? Yes. Chow Yaoli didn't know. A long time ago, after he and Murphy got together, Yang Yi sang "I Want to Sing Me to You" to Murphy on her first birthday. At night, he was pestered by Murphy to sing "Let It Go." This song hadn't been released yet, just for today. The movie Frozen all used Chinese music. Of course, in the future, it would still have to use English dubbing and English songs when it was released overseas. The most important thing was to listen to the song. Chow Yaoli was caught off guard and couldn't hear the first line clearly. But she didn't have time to be annoyed. She quickly withdrew her gaze and listened attentively. Where there are no footprints, the isolated country is very desolate. I am the queen here. Simply listening to the song wasn't exciting enough. Chow Yaoli looked at the movie scene that matched the lyrics perfectly. Elsa was alone, wearing a purple shawl, humming sadly on the top of a dark and white snowy mountain. Only God knows the injuries I've suffered. Aisha sang as she hugged her own shoulders. The animation was so detailed that even when Elsa blinked her eyes, people could see the sadness, helplessness, and confusion in her heart. This scene was very heart-wrenching. But as the lyrics and melody became more and more passionate, Elsa's emotions and thoughts changed in the picture. Let it be, there's no turning back. The beautiful ice magic seemed to spurt out ice flowers that turned into musical notes. So beautiful. It seemed that after putting down the music, Elsa became happy. This little distance makes everything more exquisite. The fear that once troubled me will be far away from my memories. Elsa took off her shawl and robe and ran happily on the snowy mountain. She continued to sing with a smile, no right or wrong, no bottom line, forward. At this moment, Elsa's feet stepped on the stairs covered with snow and spikes. A magical scene appeared. A smooth ice surface appeared under her feet, and ice magic built a bridge out of thin air. A sparkling and magnificent ice palace appeared on the big screen. The passion of the song seemed to merge with the picture at this moment. At this moment, every viewer's heart was shaken. F***ck. He Emin couldn't help but swear. Chapter 1142. There was no need to elaborate on the plot of the movie. After all, Yang Yi was the one who wrote the script and tried his best to recreate the original story. Even the character designs were drawn by Yang Yi based on his memories from his previous life. Therefore, no matter how good Frozen was in his previous life, the animation in this life would be even better. In the end, the movie came to an end after Elsa defeated the evil Hans. She brought her family, friends, and the people of the kingdom to skate and play together. This wasn't the first time that Shi, Lu Xiaoyu, and the other children had watched a movie. They knew that when a large number of subtitles and black screens appeared, the movie would end. In addition, the other audience members in the theater had also stood up and stretched, making some noise. Therefore, they reluctantly withdrew their gazes from the big screen. I'm done watching. Nan Xiaoyu sighed regretfully. Yang Luoqi, who was sitting beside him, also nodded. She pouted and said, I haven't watched enough yet. Shi's side was more lively. After she was released and could speak, she beamed with joy and couldn't wait to tell Lu Weisha what she had been holding back. Lu Weisha, do you still remember Kristoff's little deer? Although it became so big and ugly later on, it looked a little like a stupid ox, but it was still very cute when it was young. Shi and Lu Weisha communicated in Swedish. Lu Xiaoyu couldn't help but lean over and reach out to pull Shi's hand to attract Shi's attention. She said a little emotionally, Shi, what happened to Hans after that? I hate him so much. Yu Xiaowei, who was sandwiched in the middle, heard this and nodded lightly. She agreed and said, I don't like him either. The girls were discussing enthusiastically, but Chen Shiyun was more daring. She turned around and knelt on the thick cushion of the chair. She hugged the back of the chair and looked at Yang Yi eagerly. She asked, Uncle Yang, can I ask you a question? When Yang Yi heard this, he was a little surprised. When did Chen Shiyun become so polite? He didn't know that because he had promised the children a reward, the children didn't dare to be presumptuous. Even Chen Shiyun was like an obedient girl, talking to Uncle Yang obediently because they were, blindly, worried that if they didn't listen, Uncle Yang would take back the reward and not give it to them anymore. Sure. Yang Yi laughed. That's right, after watching this movie, I can watch it tomorrow? Chen Shiyun looked expectantly at Yang Yi and asked, What do you mean? Yang Yi didn't understand Chen Shiyun's words. Because I watch Duo and Little Fox. I can watch it every night. Chen Shiyun said. In fact, there was no need for Yang Yi to answer. Chen Shiyun's friends were fighting to answer Chen Shiyun's doubts. Although everyone was talking at the same time, she was still the first to answer. She chuckled and said, No, Shiyun, Duo is watching a cartoon. We can watch it on TV. We are watching a movie now. After watching the movie, there will be no more. We can't watch it tomorrow. Yang Yi finally understood. It turned out that Chen Shiyun wanted to ask him which channel the sequel of the movie would be broadcast on. Yang Yi smiled and shook his head. He pointed at the big screen that was ignored by the children and said with a smile, You can't see it on TV, but don't be in a hurry to leave. There's still a little Easter egg at the back. Hearing Yang Yi say that, all the children's eyes lit up, including Shi. They turned their little heads anxiously and didn't bother to talk. They stared at the big screen that was still showing subtitles. Yang Yi didn't fool the children. After a while, when the subtitles were about to end, Snowbow's head with a carrot stuck out appeared. On the dark big screen, its figure was very obvious. This made the little girls cry out excitedly, Wow, Snowbow! I love Snowbow so much. Although this Easter egg wasn't in the original version, Yang Yi still wrote a small script and got someone to make it. Snowbow began to explore in the dark. It was as if it had passed through a door and arrived at the beach world that it had always dreamed of. Summer. Warm wind. Scorching sun. So beautiful. However, the children all saw it lying comfortably on the beach chair and basking in the sun. In the end, it melted on its own. Snowbow panicked. Its two little branches waved helplessly, but soon, its arms melted. Its little branches fell off, and its carrot nose fell off as well. Hee. Although they sympathized with Snowbow, this scene still made the children burst into laughter. Actually, Snowbow had tortured itself quite a lot in the past. Its body had been separated a lot in the past, right? Fortunately, it had a special ability to recover, so the children weren't worried about it. Sure enough, this scene soon condensed into a dream. The real Snowbow was lying on a little bed in the ice palace. Because it was having a nightmare, it closed its eyes and danced around. However, in the end, the Easter egg ended and the movie ended. The audience gradually left the theater. Yang Yi also called the children who couldn't bear to get up to go home. So, Snowbow was dreaming. Chen Shiyun exclaimed. Uncle Yang said that they could talk after the movie ended, so she wasn't being naughty. Hee, I knew it already. Lu Xiaoyu followed behind her and smiled proudly. Snowbow won't go to a hot place. It's a snowman. However, at this time, Lan Xian, who had answered the question earlier, was very enthusiastic. She ran over to the trash can by the aisle and stuffed her empty popcorn bucket into the trash can by the aisle. Then, she stood at the side and enthusiastically took charge of the garbage disposal task. Here, you guys are here to throw the garbage. You can't throw things on the ground. Lan Xian shouted. His friends were quite cooperative. They all giggled and lined up. They continued to chat while throwing the trash. Yang Yi, on the other hand, held little Tao Wu and watched from the side. After watching the movie, Tong Tong was a little tired. He didn't like to play around and didn't like to walk by himself. Yang Yi hugged him in his arms and pouted his little mouth. It wasn't clear if he was serious or distracted, but his eyes were fixed on the line of older sisters. Regardless of whether he understood the movie or not, Yang Yi still wanted him to see these outstanding older sisters and be influenced by their good qualities. However, at this time, after Cece threw away her paper bucket, she happily jumped in front of her friends. She looked a little embarrassed, but she still eagerly said, you guys, when you were watching the movie, did you see Sister Aisha? When Sister Aisha was young, she spoke very much like me." This little girl wanted to say that she spoke like herself, but she didn't say it clearly and beat around the bush. She was eagerly waiting for her friend's approval. "Did she speak like she?" Chen Shiyun blinked in confusion. Her memory was limited, so how could she remember what Elsa's voice sounded like at the beginning? "I remember now." On the other hand, Lu Xiaoyu was very supportive. She excitedly raised her hand and said happily, She, you told me that you were Sister Elsa." Under the surprised and envious gazes of her friends, She embarrassedly shook her little butt and giggled. "No, I'm not Sister Elsa. I'm just a voice actor. I speak for Sister Elsa when she was young." "Wow." Lu Weisha, Yu Xiaowei, and the rest of her friends looked at She with admiration. She seemed really amazing. Chapter 1143. The box office of Frozen on its opening day was actually quite good. After all, Yang Yi himself had a lot of appeal, and many fans were willing to buy tickets to watch his first animated film. In the past, Shi's bedtime stories had also cultivated a group of loyal fans. Now that Frozen had been made into an animated film, these fans naturally pestered their parents to take them to the cinema to watch Elsa. This also made the opening box office of Frozen ranked at the top of the single-day box office of the currently released films, and even made it into the top 5. For an animated film, this was already a very good result. Some media outlets had analyzed the reason for Frozen's sudden rise in popularity in the early stages. This analysis was correct, but it also made a judgment that after Frozen consumed the purchasing power of the fans, the box office figures would decline. But who would have thought that after 3 or 4 days, Frozen would receive a flood of good reviews? Not only did the children like to watch it, but the parents who accompanied them to the cinema also enjoyed it. This is the best movie to take your child to this summer. The plot is simple but exciting. The cinematography is beautiful but not flashy. All in all, this movie is very good. I really want to have the magical ice magic of Princess Elsa. After taking off the gloves, I can soar in the sky with the ice and snow. This was a movie review by a girl in her 20s. She did not care about showing her young girl's heart that had been aroused. I've watched it for the second time. Although I'm Yang Yi's die-hard fan, I still can't help but recommend this movie to everyone. Perhaps many people don't know this, but this story was once made up by Yang Yi to coax Shi, who was only 4 years old at the time, to sleep. Now, 3 or 4 years later, he can finally let his daughter watch this movie on the big screen. It's still as exciting as ever, and it's still as exciting as ever. Just thinking about it makes me want to cry. With the accumulation of word of mouth and the recommendation of many people by their friends who had watched the movie in their daily lives, Frozen's box office figures increased instead of decreasing. Although the increase in the box office was rather linear, after 3 to 4 days, the daily box office ranking of Frozen jumped from 5th place to 2nd place. Moreover, the media had received news from the theater chains that they had made corresponding adjustments based on the feedback from the market. Frozen's tickets are hard to come by. It could be said that for the first time, they had given an animated film a screen time slot that was only available to commercial action films with a box office hit. He believed that after the adjustments, the box office of Frozen would be even higher and more magical. Who knows, it might be able to compete with normal commercial films. The media was more concerned about the box office data, but few people noticed that in the Sahara online shopping mall, as well as in the major supermarkets, children's stores, and bookstores across the country, the licensed products of Frozen were produced by several factories invested by Yang Yi. Even Cece's bedtime stories, which originally included this story, was selling like hotcakes because of the popularity of the movie. The following scene played out in front of ordinary people during the rest of the summer break. "Mom. Mother. Look, it's baby Snow." While they were shopping in the supermarket, a little boy suddenly couldn't move. He yelled and dragged his mother's hand, forcing her to leave the shelves of soy sauce, chili sauce, and other condiments. He wanted her to accompany him to see all kinds of best-selling soft toys on the counter in the middle aisle. Perhaps it was because he couldn't stand it anymore, or perhaps it was because he had tears in his eyes, but his mother said helplessly, Okay, 90 yuan for a doll. Oh my God, it's so expensive. Forget it, you can buy one. The little boy wiped away his tears and jumped up in joy. He excitedly dived into the shelves and started picking. But soon, he was conflicted again. I like this, and I like that. Mom, I want both. No, I want these too. Let's buy one more, okay? Just as the little boy was bargaining with his mother, an older lady next to him blushed and secretly picked up a cute doll of Anna when she was young. She covered her snickering mouth and ran away dejectedly. After Frozen became popular, reporters began to dig up the news from Han Xiansen Entertainment Express. In the news, besides the real relationship between Yang Yi and Lan Caocai and the possibility that Yang Yi was a shareholder of Sahara Online Mall, there were also many photos of Yang Yi and Lan Caocai in the super-large amusement park in Jinling that was under construction. These photos didn't attract much attention at the time, but now that they were republished and reported, it became the headline news a week after Frozen was released. For this movie, Yang Yi built an amusement park? The fans of Frozen were pleasantly surprised and asked in the comment section of the news, "Where is this place? Can we play now?" It had to be said that looking at the photos, the amusement park had already been built to a large scale with various Frozen-themed rides, as well as the Ice Palace, painted in the color of ice and snow, which was said to be designed to be close to the same scale, were also very shocking. Fans who really liked the story and the characters in the movie couldn't sit still when they saw the huge Ice Palace. Since this news caught the attention of the public and the officials had so many questions, the reporters took action one after another. They even went to the premiere of The Shawshank Redemption to stop Yang Yi. This movie was released a week after Frozen, but it also attracted a lot of attention before it was released. Whether the movie was good or not was another matter. The director and cast of this movie could be said to be luxurious. International director Wu Yian was the director, with Jie Yuchen and Li Baogua as the lead actors. There was also a large supporting cast of veteran actors. Even Chen Fengchen played a supporting role. Gua Zi and other young actors were also playing cameos. Just based on this cast, The Shawshank Redemption was already hyped up even before it was released. Many movies that were released during the summer break at the same time sounded the alarm. There were even many media outlets who said that Frozen had successfully made a comeback to the top after a week. Perhaps only Yang Yi's other movie, The Shawshank Redemption, could beat it. Regardless of the movie's later results, many media outlets were now very interested in Yang Yi's amusement park. Even though he didn't respond to questions about Frozen at the premiere, after the premiere, Yang Yi still accepted interviews with a few reporters who were on good terms with him under the arrangement of his company. That's right, Big Brother Lon and I invested in building this amusement park together. Yang Yi said with a smile, "Everyone can guess the reason. It's all for the sake of children. Let's put aside the money and whatnot. I promised Shi before that I would build her the world's largest and most fun amusement park, so as everyone can see, the first phase of the amusement park is already under construction." As for the question the reporters asked on behalf of the netizens about when they could visit the amusement park, Yang Yi also gave a relatively clear answer, which was rare for him. At present, the first phase of the project is basically nearing the end, but because it still needs to go through testing, acceptance, and other complicated post-production works, I don't know these terms very well, but the news I received from Big Brother Lon is that it's definitely not going to happen this year. Sorry, it's really not going to make it in time for the movie. Yang Yi smiled at the reporters, waved his hand, and said, "But we can look forward to next spring and summer. Under the premise of ensuring quality, we will let everyone see the first phase of the entire large-scale amusement park as soon as possible, which is the theme park of Frozen. At that time, we also welcome fans who like to come and play." Chapter 1144. The box office of The Shawshank Redemption was doing well at the beginning. After all, it had such a big cast of stars and an overwhelming amount of publicity. On the second day, the box office of The Shawshank Redemption surpassed Frozen and was ranked first. But no one would have thought that the good times would not last long. Although the Prison Break-themed movie expressed profound content, it was also very serious. Its box office began to decline in just a week. From the perspective of the movie itself, its plot was worthy of careful consideration. On some film review websites, its ratings were also very high. It could be said that the fans who liked it would not be stingy with their high ratings. Even if the fans did not like such a depressing plot, they would not give a low rating. After all, the story and life principles it told were still very shocking. Even on the film magazines, those professional film critics gave it very high marks. They even praised it as a good movie that was hard to come by in 10 years. But even so, it could not change the seriousness of its theme, nor could it change the depressing plot. Don't compare it with Prison Break, which had a gripping plot and high ratings. Both were Prison Break-themed movies, but Prison Break was more like a commercial film, while The Shawshank Redemption was more like a literary film. The progress of the plot was like boiling a frog in warm water. Although it could be thought-provoking, it was not exciting enough. Many young people came to the cinema to watch movies. Didn't they come for the excitement or joy of the plot? Naturally, such a heavy-hearted movie began to become a niche audience. Of course, the box office of The Shawshank Redemption was declining, and it might not even meet the expectations of the investors in the future. It was already much better than Yang Yi's previous life. This was a story for another time, so let's not talk about it here. Let's return to our children. After watching Frozen, which they could not forget, the children were even more interested in visiting the so-called doll production factory that Yang Yi had promised earlier. She received calls from her friends from time to time. Then, she actively ran to her father and asked, "Papa, Sister Xiaowei asked me. She wants to go and see it too." Yang Yi patted Shi's little head and said with a smile, "Of course, didn't I promise you last time that you could let your friends visit it together?" But, Papa, when can we go and see it?" She blinked and asked. Yang Yi originally wanted to give the answer directly, but he rolled his eyes and had a new idea. He smiled and said, "It depends on how you arrange it." "How do I arrange it?" The little girl looked at her father in confusion. "Yes, I'll leave this event to you. How about it?" Yang Yi smiled and said, "You can confirm the time, then call your friends and tell them to gather at our house like last time. Dad will arrange a minibus to take you all to visit the factory." Obviously, Yang Yi wanted to exercise Shi's organizing ability. In fact, he had asked Shi to do similar things before, but they were relatively simple. For example, when Shi was in kindergarten, she wanted to invite Yang Luoqi, Chan Shiyun, and other friends to play at home. Yang Yi asked her to confirm with each child and get the phone numbers of their parents. Now that she was a big girl who was almost 7 years old, it was time for her to try some more complicated challenges. But I don't know how to arrange it." She was very happy at first, but the clever little girl quickly thought of the key point. She intertwined 2 fingers and said to her father. Yang Yi said with a smile, "It doesn't matter if you don't know, Papa will teach you. You can call them one by one and ask when they are free. It's best if they can spare half a day, and then you can count them into a table." Yang Yi really taught Shi to draw a table, so that it would be more convenient to fill in the statistical results and more intuitive to get the conclusion they wanted. Shi listened very carefully. Although the little girl was not like before, when she always liked to ask why, she was obviously more focused when learning new things. "Papa, but what if they are not free? What should we do?" She raised her little face and looked at her father worriedly. "Generally speaking, they are free on weekends." Yang Yi gently analyzed for the little girl. Now they are not free because their parents have to go to work, so their parents ask them to read books and do summer homework at home. She blinked her big eyes and smiled sweetly. But I have finished my summer homework." In order to show off, the little girl digressed a little. However, Yang Yi still guided Shi to calculate everyone's schedule first, and then negotiate and adjust according to the situation. Therefore, Shi excitedly held the home phone and sat on the sofa, ready to call her friends. Yang Yi helped Shi to take the table she had just drawn and the pen she had just drawn and put it on the coffee table. Then, he left like a shopkeeper. Although it was not dinner time yet, Yang Yi still wanted to create a relatively independent environment for Shi. In order not to give her a chance to rely on him, he went into the kitchen. However, Yang Yi miscalculated. Shi was not alone. She had a little helper. Tong Tong was in the living room. Now that his sister was here, he came over eagerly. Moreover, the little fellow was quite tactful. His sister sat cross-legged on the sofa, while he grinned and leaned against the thick sofa, standing in front of his sister. "Little brother, who do you think we should call first?" She tilted her head and touched her chin with her fingers. She asked Tong Tong, "Yes, what about Sister Lu Wei Sha? Or Xin? Sister Xin Air doesn't need to. She is definitely free. But she hasn't finished her summer homework yet. Also, should we call Sister Fishy first, or should we call?" She rattled off a lot of names. Little Bai An, on the other hand, understood quite a bit and was very happy to participate. He began to wave his right hand with his fingers outstretched in an excited manner and said in a childish voice, Big sis. No, which sister? Why don't we call Sister Fishy first?" She had an idea of her own. She patted her little skirt and said cheerfully. When Tong Tong heard his sister say this, he did not know if his sister's words were the same as his own. Anyway, he thought that his sister had gotten the idea from him. He squinted his eyes and smiled happily. He patted the sofa and said, okay. She had already memorized the phone number of her deskmate's house. Under Tong Tong's gaze, she began to dial the number. The call was quickly connected, and Cici called out cheerfully, "Little you, let me tell you." But just as quickly, Shi's expression became a little embarrassed. Her voice became a lot quieter. She said embarrassedly, "Hey, it's not Fishy?" "Hello, Auntie. I'm Shi." Lu Xiaoyu's mother answered the phone. After she said a few words to Shi, she called Lu Xiaoyu over. Chapter 1145. This phone is so magical. It wasn't that little soprano had never seen her parents talk on the phone before. However, standing in front of her sister and watching her press the red button for a while before she started talking, it could be said that this was the first time she had seen it from such a close distance. This feeling was different. Tong Tong stared at his sister with his big, curious eyes. Although his sister was happily talking to Sister Fishy, Tong Tong did not pay attention to what his sister was talking about. His gaze finally landed on the phone that was pressing against his sister's skirt. After a while, Shi finished making the first call. She put down the phone and moved it to the sofa beside her. She got down from Tong Tong's side excitedly and ran to the kitchen in a hurry. "I'm going to look for Papa." Tong Tong did not want to look for Papa. He was very interested in the phone now. It was just as well that his sister was leaving. He did not have to ask his sister to share the phone with him. Tong Tong came back to his senses and grinned happily. He reached out his small hand and hooked it. His hand was too short to reach the phone. Tong Tong was not discouraged. He swiftly pressed down on the sofa and climbed up with his butt sticking out. Tong Tong followed his sister's example and grabbed the phone. What was interesting was that he didn't pull the receiver down. The receiver was facing his hair, and the receiver was facing his chin. If it weren't for the wrong position, the little guy would have really made a phone call. Wow. Tong Tong mumbled a few times. However, he realized that there was no sound from the phone as he had expected. He looked at the phone in his hand suspiciously. That's right. My sister pressed the red button on the phone when she made the call. Tong Tong was very good at imitating. He followed his sister's example and pressed the button on the phone. She ran to report her work progress to her father. After a while, Yang Yi pushed her out of the kitchen and said with a smile, "Since you have asked about Fishy, you can record her situation on the form that we just gave you." You can make a decision after you have tallied up everyone's situation. Alright. But little fishy is fine with anything. She turned around and said to her father hesitantly. It's the same. Put a tick in every box, Yang Yi said. When they arrived at the living room, Yang Yi planned to instruct Shi to do the first statistics before going back. However, to their surprise, they saw Tong Tong talking to the phone with a serious face. No there. The little fellow was still waving his little hands as if he was very anxious. When he saw his sister appear, he seemed to have an inspiration. Mommy, sister said, why was this kid playing with his phone? Who was he talking to? Yang Yi was stunned for a moment, but he immediately reacted and reached out to Tong Tong for the phone. Tong Tong also felt that he could not express himself clearly. When he saw his father, it was as if he had seen his savior. He quickly passed the phone to his father. However, he still did not know that he had done something wrong. He giggled and looked at his father expectantly. He wanted to see how his father would make the phone call. Hello, I'm sorry. Just now. After Yang Yi took the phone and was about to explain and apologize, he found that there was only a long beep sound coming from the receiver. Obviously, the other party had hung up at some point. Or, Tong Tong did not make the call at all? Then why was he talking so enthusiastically? Yang Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry as he put the phone back. Then, he picked up Tong Tong and pinched his chubby little face. He laughed and said, why are you playing with your phone? You can't play with these electronic devices casually. Tong Tong blinked and pointed at his sister, who was putting the phone back in her original position. She was more active in helping her brother. She raised her head and reached out to hold her father's wrist. She whispered, Papa, don't scold my brother. My brother only played with his phone because he saw that I was talking on the phone. Oh. When Tong Tong heard his sister's words, he seemed to feel that the atmosphere was not right. He knew that he had done something wrong, so he hesitantly leaned against his father's chest and did not dare to speak carelessly. Last time, he tore his sister's book and was scolded by his father. When he made a mistake, his father was scarier. The witty Tong Tong felt that it was better for him to be obedient at this time. Yang Yi was not angry that Tong Tong and Shi had made the wrong judgment. He just felt that it was funny, especially when Tong Tong pretended to hold the phone and talk on the phone, but no one was talking to him. Yang Yi felt that it was funny when he thought about it. It's okay. Yang Yi smiled and touched Tong Tong's little nose. He said softly, Papa is not scolding you. It's just that you don't know how to use the phone yet. When you grow up, Papa and Mama will teach you how to use the phone. Tong Tong playing with the phone was just a small episode, and he did not make a big mistake like calling the police. Therefore, after Yang Yi gently covered it up, he let Shi continue with her work. Papa, look. After making phone calls all morning, the little girl finally finished counting. She ran over and stuffed her booklet into her father's hands. She looked at her father's face expectantly, hoping that her father would praise her. Very good. You've finished counting. Yang Yi did not let his daughter down. After taking a look at Shi's statistics, he gave the little girl a thumbs up. Shi smiled and snuggled up to her father with satisfaction. She said, Papa, what should we do next? Yang Yi gestured at the table and analyzed it for Shi. Look at the vertical bar. Many people are not free on Wednesday, and many on Thursday and Friday. Just as Papa guessed, they are free on the weekend. Yes, but Chi is not free on Saturday. She had a good memory. She quickly said to her father, because Chi is going to have piano lessons. She told me that she wants to learn piano. Piano lessons? If there is an arrangement, it will be difficult to adjust. Nan Zhaoyu is not free on Saturday and Sunday, and only Nan Zhaoyu is not free on Sunday. What does he want to do? Yang Yi raised his eyebrows and asked with a smile. Zhaoyu? Well, he doesn't want to do anything. She also thought for a while before connecting the dots. Her eyes lit up and she said to her father, I know, Zhao Yu said that his papa and mom are going to do something, and then they are not free. Yang Yi could roughly guess what the situation was. After Nan Yun got better, he often attended some calligraphy activities to earn some tuition for Nan Zhaoyu's college fees. Nan Zhaoyu's mother also had to accompany him. Sometimes they would take Nan Zhaoyu, and sometimes they would let him read at home. Therefore, sometimes on weekends, when Shishi invited her friends to her house to play, Nan Zhaoyu often regretted that he could not come. However, Yang Yi's eyes flashed with a strange light. He said in his heart, "Should I kick this kid out? He is obviously a boy. Why does he play with girls all day?" However, he only thought about it for a moment. Soon, he shook his head and tossed the thought away. It was not worthwhile to scheme against a child. Therefore, Yang Yi smiled and said to Shishi, "That's easy. We can ask. Since his parents are not free, let's see if they agree. We will pick up Nan Zhaoyu on Sunday and visit with them. After the visit, we will send him back. I think his parents will agree." "Yes. If Zhaoyu's papa and mom agree, that would be great." She nodded with joy. Yang Yi rubbed the little girl's head with jealousy and said with a smile, "Go and make the call. This is your job." Chapter 1146. Perhaps for Lan Xin, who procrastinated and didn't like to do her summer homework and ended up being stared at by her angry mother, the past few days were particularly long. However, for Cici, who had been looking forward to the weekend all day long, time passed very quickly. Finally, the weekend came, and the little guys were finally liberated. Early in the morning, the little girls happily came to Shishi's house. It was like a spring outing. Each of the little girls wore their favorite small skirts, their favorite butterfly sandals, or their favorite pink sneakers. They got on the minibus and were ready to go to the factory. Of course, their first stop was still to pick up Nan Zhaoyu, who was still waiting for them at home. Since his parents were not at home, Yang Yi went to pick up Nan Zhaoyu. He also told the excited little boy to lock the door. Then, Nan Zhaoyu ran downstairs, carrying his small school bag, and rushed to Shishi's minibus. Yang Yi followed behind and heard the little boy gasping for breath. He said to his little friends, Oh, great. You finally came. I thought you had already left. You don't want me anymore." Seeing him talking and laughing with the little girls, Yang Yi laughed in his heart. When they arrived at the doll factory, Lu Benji and the factory's director were already waiting there. The big boss was bringing the future little boss to inspect. How could they not cheer up? What's more, Yang Yi also asked Lu Benji to be in charge of this matter. He asked him to prepare and plan the children's tour route. After all, he couldn't arrange for the children to watch the production line of some creepy dolls. There would be a lot of doll parts there, such as broken heads and arms flowing on the conveyor belt. Naturally, these scenes should be avoided from the children. How to arrange this trip so that the children would not feel that the tour was scary, but would feel that it was very interesting. In addition, it would be best if they could learn some knowledge. This was a headache for Lu Benji. Fortunately, Lu Benji was worthy of the high salary that Yang Yi had given him. In just a few days, he had arranged the work that his boss had given him. Let's put on our safety helmets first, because we're going to visit the factory first. In the factory, safety is always our first priority. Lu Benji volunteered to take on the responsibility of hosting and explaining. He smiled and handed over the small safety helmets specially made for the children. Wearing the safety helmet was uncomfortable, but the interesting thing was that none of the children complained. Instead, they felt that the safety helmet was very novel. It was a small yellow hat with a hard plastic top. Thus, they lined up to receive the safety helmet and scrambled to put it on. Shishi, look at me. After Chen Shiyun put on the safety helmet, she smiled foolishly and ran to Shishi. She stuck her head out to Shishi and said, knock a few more times. Shishi was puzzled and knocked on the plastic shell a few times. Chen Shiyun then raised her head and said proudly, Hee, Shishi, my head can be used as a drum. She was also amused by her little friend. She smiled and asked, "Shiryun, won't your head hurt?" "Nope. You try it too." Chen Shiryun was an impatient person, and she did things swiftly and decisively. Therefore, before she finished speaking, she reached out her hand and knocked on Cece's helmet. "Ah!" She exclaimed. Chen Shiryun's eyes widened. She thought that she had hurt She. She nervously and worriedly grabbed Shishi's arm and whispered, Why does it hurt?" She was no longer frowning. She regained her bright smile and said, Hee, it doesn't hurt. I was just shocked when you suddenly knocked on my head." Chen Shiryun was relieved. She smiled proudly at Shi and squinted her eyes. "See, I told you it doesn't hurt." Yang Yi also put a super small safety helmet on Tong Tong. It was probably custom made by Lu Benji for Tong Tong. However, the little guy seemed to feel a little uncomfortable, especially when the strap was hanging under his neck. It made him feel a little uncomfortable, so he reached out to push the hat. Yang Yi quickly pointed at Shi and the others and said to Tong Tong, "Look at the big sisters wearing them. It's so fun." Tong Tong looked at the big sisters playing happily. He blinked his eyes in confusion. Finally, under the influence of his big sisters, he agreed to wear the safety helmet. What was interesting was that after putting on the safety helmet, perhaps because there was something pressing down on his head, little Momo seemed to have put on a golden hoop and became obedient. Earlier, he was still making a fuss about going down to stand with his sisters. Now, he was quietly being carried by his father. He even looked up at the big factory with some effort and no longer had the energy to make a fuss. This was good. Yang Yi was also worried that Tong Tong would run around. After all, this was a factory, and there were a lot of dangerous machines. As for Shi and the others, Yang Yi and the other parents followed behind them to take care of the little guys. Let's go in from the west door. First, let's take a look at the clothes made by our dolls. Look at the beautiful clothes, such as Elsa's and Anna's dresses, okay? Lu Benji was very competent as a tour guide. He coaxed the group of children as if they were children. Okay. Shi and the others responded at the same time. Although it was inconvenient to look up with a safety helmet, they still tried their best to look up and looked at Uncle Lu with excitement. She was more enthusiastic about translating to Lu Weisha. After translating, she said excitedly, "Lu Weisha, let me tell you, Elsa's dress is blue and white. It's very beautiful. Anna's dress is in many colors, and I like the purple one the most." When Yang Yi heard Lu Benji's arrangement to go in from the west door, he knew what Lu Benji had in mind. That was actually the core area of the doll factory. Compared to the other areas, although there were mechanical aids, it was definitely not an assembly line operation. The dolls made in other areas were almost all very cheap and mass-produced products. For example, the dolls sold in supermarkets for 9.90 yuan, and the dolls sold in bookstores or shopping malls for less than 500 yuan were all made on an assembly line. As for the west door, it was the place where the factory hired a group of artisans with high salaries. They specialized in making commemorative or limited edition dolls. These dolls were also sold in the Sahara online shopping mall. Because of the exquisite workmanship and the exquisite materials, not only the fabric, but also the leather or high-end wood, and the high-quality packaging, the dolls were sold for thousands of yuan. Some of them were even sold for tens of thousands of yuan. It could be said that only the rich and fanatics could afford to play with high-end figurines. However, compared to the assembly line, such a production area might be more amiable to the children. It would not be scary to see a pile of broken arms piled up together. Chapter 1147. Walking into the workshop of the old craftsman in the doll factory, Lu Benji's enthusiasm was in vain, because there was a relatively large stone statue in front of them, as well as some anime figurines displayed on the shelves behind, which completely attracted the attention of the little guys. Wow! The exclamations came one after another, and the little guys looked at the dolls of different shapes with blurred eyes. They were so envious that they held their hands in front of them, wishing that they could pull out their hearts to show their friends. Their hearts were full of love for these dolls. The workshop here not only made frozen dolls, but also many figurines made according to the children's stories and prototype designs provided by Yang Yi. There was a frog prince with a crown on his head, Little Red Riding Hood with a red hat, and there was also a little squirrel with a sneaky look who was hugging an acorn and refusing to let go of it. So many cartoon characters that had only appeared in the form of illustrations in She's bedtime stories now appeared in front of the children, which naturally awakened their best memories. Perhaps it was a visual impact, but even a shy little girl like Yang Luochi couldn't help but cheer. She ran up, turned around excitedly, and said to her friends, "Wow! There are 7 dwarfs, 1, 2, 3. There are 7 of them." Not only was Yang Luochi very excited, but Yu Xiaowei also pursed her lips and quickly walked forward a few steps. Then, she slowed down and looked back at her mother, uncles, and aunts in embarrassment. "I recognize this one, but you definitely don't remember it." Chen Shuyun's eyes also lit up. She ran up, pointed to a long-nosed puppet, and shouted excitedly. Lon Xian didn't give him any face. She snorted and said, "I remember too. Isn't it just Pinocchio? Shi's house also has one." Lu Weisha saw that her friends were discussing so enthusiastically, and she ran to the front eagerly. She used the Chinese that she had learned in less than half a month and said to everyone, "I like it, all of them. I like it." In fact, at this time, she was not calm. The little girl was surprised to find that there were many dolls on the shelf that she didn't have. Although Lon Xian said that she had Pinocchio, it was only brought back by her father. Although the little girl didn't say anything, her eyes were wide open, and her gaze swept over the dolls one by one. Her little heart was beating wildly because of these dolls. There were some voices in her mind. "Oh, why are there so many? There are so many dolls that I don't have?" Yes, she once thought that her house had most of the beautiful dolls in the world, but now she found that her collection was actually only a small part of the world. There were so many wonderful things that she hadn't explored yet. For a time, the little girl's heart was intertwined with many emotions. Loss, regret, surprise, joy, hesitation. Shi's eyes couldn't move away from these shelves. She was still thinking that the gold coins in her small wooden box weren't enough to buy so many beautiful dolls. Moreover, Shi also made an appointment with Lu Weisha to go to Lu Weisha's house to play in winter. Lu Weisha had told Shi that her house had a very beautiful aurora. In winter, she could also ski, ride a sleigh, and so on. It's so hard to choose. The little girl was in a dilemma. However, her motivation to work hard to earn gold coins was once again stimulated. With dozens of gold coins in savings, the little girl had lost her motivation for a long time. Looking at the dolls on display, the little girls and boys, including Tong Tong, were reluctant to leave. It was only when Lu Benji promised that he would bring them back to pick a doll that they liked at the end of the day, this was originally planned, that the little guys obediently followed the adults to the craftsman's workshop in front of them. They didn't roll all over the floor and refused to leave. The first thing they visited was the craftsman's workshop. Currently, everyone was making dolls with a frozen theme. After all, these products, even if they were purely handmade, were in short supply. Therefore, when they saw a long robe made of fur on the table, the little guys excitedly shouted, "This is Christoph's robe. He's a hunter." Why did they think that Christoph was a hunter? Because the little guys could only think of the movie they watched last week. They thought that Christoph, who could run wildly in the forest on a reindeer and dress like that, should be a hunter. Luckily, she had a good memory. She had almost memorized the story of Sister Elsa by heart. She quickly stood up and explained to her little friends with a serious face, No, Christoph is a worker. He's an ice digger. At the beginning, they were digging ice. Of course, this was just a small episode. Next, Lu Benji asked the craftsman to show the little guys how to sew a dress similar to Sister Elsa's dress. Although the craftsmen were only sewing the dress together with the half-finished blue-green slim-fit dress, the craftsman focused on the sewing machine. The little guys couldn't help but exclaim in admiration as they watched the machine and the meticulous connection between the machine and the sewing machine. After all, they were all little girls. Perhaps they were naturally more interested in this kind of craftsmanship. They all watched with great interest for a long time, including Nan Zhaoyu. Tong Tong, on the other hand, wasn't very interested. After watching for a while, he turned his head, wearing a small safety hat, to look for other interesting projects. There really were some. After a while, the little guy saw a few craftsmen behind his father. They were using a carving knife to carve a wooden doll that hadn't fully formed yet. The way the wood shavings were picked out from time to time, and the way the carving knife flew up and down instantly attracted the little guy's attention. Tong Tong clung to his father's shoulders with his 2 little hands and watched intently. It was rare that he didn't make a fuss. He was very obedient, just like Sun Wukong, who wore a golden hoop. In this workshop, the little guys could see the process of making and assembling a purely handmade doll. Many craftsmen were demonstrating, and Uncle Lu was explaining. It was an eye-opener for the little guys. However, the beginning of the workshop was already such an exciting demonstration of the production of high-end dolls. Could there be even more exciting content in the following tours? Wouldn't it disappoint the little guys? Next, let's go to the next packaging workshop. There, we can understand how the cute and interesting dolls that our parents usually give you on your birthdays are delivered from the factory to your hands. Do you guys want to know more? Lu Benji, who was making a cameo appearance, said cheerfully as he greeted the little guys. Nan Zhaoyu, Lu Xiaoyu, and the other kids hadn't recovered from the dazzling demonstration just now, so they replied in a daze, yes. Shi, on the other hand, was more enthusiastic. She giggled and said, yes, to her friends. Then, she moved to the front, raised her head, and looked at Uncle Lu with sparkling eyes. She said, Uncle Lu, I know that the dolls are all in the store. Then my papa will buy flowers and put the dolls in the flowers for my mom. Oh, I was wrong. Hee, this is a gift from my papa to my mom, not for me. The little girl scratched her head in embarrassment and laughed with a red face. The adults behind them also roared with laughter. Murphy, who was standing next to Yang Yi, was a little embarrassed. She wanted to hide behind Yang Yi, but she didn't want to be an adult. She could only smile helplessly, stomp her feet, and say angrily, Shi. The little girl thought that everyone was laughing at her. Instead, she shyly ran behind her father and hid. Then, she stuck out her little head, giggled, and whispered, Papa didn't give me a doll as a birthday gift. It's a very beautiful treehouse, and I can turn on the lights. Chapter 1148. Of course, what Lu Benji wanted to show the children was not flowers, tree houses, or anything else that Shishi's little brain would think of. Soon, the children saw a completely automated packaging assembly line. Here, these are the dolls that we produce. After being screened by our quality inspectors, they will all be gathered here. Lu Benji stood in front of a huge round plate and introduced it to the children. The large round plate that reflected a silver metallic light was densely packed with Mom's little snow bow dolls. Each of them was about the size of an adult's fist, and they were all stuffed with cloth and cotton. They looked as simple and adorable as Snow Bao, but in terms of delicacy, these small dolls that were sold at the supermarket for 9.90 yuan could not be compared to the handmade wooden dolls or plush dolls that Shi and the others had seen earlier. But there were many of them. Many of them were righteous. When the children saw so many Snow Bao squeezed together, how could they care to see if it was as beautiful as they had seen earlier? They were all surprised and exclaimed softly, Wow! There are so many Snow Bao. Shishi looked at the large round plate, and her big eyes were so excited that little stars almost appeared. Lu Xiaoyu, who loved Snow Bao the most, even called out Snow Bao's name, Olaf, and her body involuntarily moved closer. Fortunately, Shishi quickly pulled her desk mate back, and the especially serious little girl began to help maintain order. She hurriedly said to Lu Xiaoyu, Little fishy, you can't touch it. It's dangerous. Lon Xian was also full of a sense of justice. She opened her arms in front of Lu Xiaoyu and shouted loudly, Yes, you can't go over there. Uncle Lu just said that the machine is very scary. If it's not an adult, it will eat the children. The little girl's sentence order was a little wrong, but it sounded like there was nothing wrong with it. Lu Xiaoyu was frightened by the two of them. She nervously shrank her little arms, and seemed to be a little scared. Their side was very lively, and Nan Xiaoyu, who was a little slow, also shrank his head. He embarrassedly retracted his little hands that wanted to touch the dolls, but he had nowhere to put them, so he could only scratch his head. Lu Benji praised the two little girls who helped to maintain order, and then asked the worker to start the packaging line and demonstrate it to the children. The conveyor belt began to move. At first, there was a little noise from the gears, and it scared the little girls so that they hurriedly huddled together and hid next to their respective parents. Nan Xiaoyu was alone. Fortunately, Lu Benji went to hold his hand, and did not let him look left and right helplessly for too long. When the conveyor belt started moving, the sound of the gears became softer and less ear-piercing. At this time, the worker pressed another button, and a small opening opened at the bottom of the large circular plate. Because this large circular plate originally looked like a funnel, after this small opening, the dolls on top rolled down like ripe fruits on a tree. "Papa, it's falling." She stood next to her father. She was nervous, but she could not help but look curiously. When she saw something interesting, she could not help but pull her father's hand and exclaim in a low voice, "After the conveyor belt moves, our dolls will gradually separate, and they will not be crowded together. Then, you see, when we come here they are already in line, and they keep the same distance." Lu Benji walked in front and explained as he guided them. "So obedient." Young Luochi muttered in a low voice. "Yes, they are very obedient, and so are you." Lu Benji laughed. Young Luochi realized that her whisper was heard, and she shrunk into her mother's arms, embarrassed. Next, they came to the core module of the assembly line, which was more high-tech. There was a mechanical arm, and the front end looked like a claw. The computer in the background would judge according to the information provided by the camera to the program, and then give the mechanical arm an accurate adjustment signal. The dolls that were not placed properly, side, upside down, face down, were all adjusted to the same position by the mechanical arm. "Wow! A robot!" Nan Xiaoyu walked in front and exclaimed as he watched. The little girls were also watching with great interest. Cici walked together with her father, and she felt that it was very magical. She raised her head and asked her father curiously, Papa, why is this robot so powerful? How did it arrange snow bow so well?" This question stumped Yang Yi. How could Yang Yi understand such a profound technical question? He pondered for a while, and frankly said, "There are a lot of scientific principles in this. Papa doesn't understand it, but when you grow up and learn more, you will have the opportunity to understand it." "Papa doesn't know?" She said with some disappointment. "It's normal that Papa doesn't know." Yang Yi smiled, touched the little girl's head, and said, "Papa is not omnipotent, but we can do this. When we go back, let's go online and find out how these robots move, okay?" The regret on she's face immediately disappeared. She nodded happily and said with a sweet smile, "Okay. Papa, we can make little brother's robot like this. It can move, and little brother will like it very much." Yang Yi looked down at Tong Tong. The little guy was also attracted by the mechanical arm. His big eyes under the helmet were focused on the big guy moving around, as if he was also trying to figure out what it was. "Haha, we can give it a try." Yang Yi did not dampen she's spirits. He patted her on the shoulder and laughed. The packaging box at the back was automatically folded, and then the snowbow dolls that were arranged neatly were stuffed into the packaging box one by one. There was no need to elaborate on the process of this visit. The little ones were very fascinated by it. Even to the extent that other than Cici, who had many discoveries to share with her father, the other children could only exclaim and praise, forgetting to chat with each other. The assembly line was not boring. Compared with the previous ingenious works of the craftsman, this part of the tour was not so exquisite and pleasing to the eyes. However, the completely automatic packaging line was still an eye-opener for the children. It was as if they had walked into the world of technology from an era of handwork. The magical technology made them forget to go back. "All right, Now that we've finished visiting the packaging line, where should we go next? Does anyone know? Lu Benji deliberately kept them guessing and asked. As they were already familiar with each other, the children were not as shy as they were at the beginning. They enthusiastically participated in the interaction. Anyway, it's not going home, Chen Shiyun shouted loudly. Her answer made the girls giggle. Yes, we have a tour next, but do you know what it is? Lu Benji asked with a smile. We don't know. The honest Lu Xiaoyu and Nan Xiaoyu shook their heads. Cici, on the other hand, was actively thinking about the answer. At this time, she was no longer standing with her father. Instead, she was squeezing with her friends. The tall little girl even stood on her tiptoes and struggled to raise her small hand, wanting Uncle Lu to see her. She was very disciplined and did not rush to answer. She, why don't you tell us? Lu Benji called her name as expected. I know. We are going to see a lot of magical toys. She's bright big eyes seemed to be able to speak. She revealed a bright smile and said crisply, In the car, I heard you and my papa talking about it. You have prepared a lot of fun toys for us to see. Lu Benji looked at she with some surprise. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he nodded and said, That's right. She, you are very well informed. Indeed, this time, because the lovely children are going to visit, the factory manager is worried that there won't be any good products for you to see. Therefore, our publishing house and the factory jointly set up a very interesting small laboratory. We have specially made some very magical toys for you. They are really magical, as if they are controlled by magic. I guarantee that when you see them, you will feel that it is as wonderful as watching a movie. Lu Benji's last introduction was like a wizard's bewitchment, which immediately caught the children's appetite. Wow! There's magic! Hearing She's translation, Lu Weisha excitedly jumped up and down. She pulled She's hand and said in surprise, I want to see it, She. It must be wonderful. It's not magic, it's just like magic. She translated it methodically. She giggled and said, But I also want to see it. Chapter 1149. Indeed, it was just a small factory, so there was nothing worth visiting. Lu Benji and his staff could imagine the creative editors of the publishing house and the craftsmen of the factory working together to build a toy laboratory based on science. They wanted to use the magical phenomena of science to create special toys for the children. Yang Yi was very supportive of this idea. Under Lu Benji's lead, the children and their parents arrived at the simple and crude laboratory. When they entered the lab, Cici and her friends were actually a bit disappointed. After all, there were no fancy dolls on the shelves in this lab, nor were there any big round dolls that were tightly packed together. There were also no magical effects such as lightning, thunder, and frost that they had imagined. There were only some tables that were neatly arranged like the ones in the workshop in front of them and some laboratory utensils on them. They were not surprised at all. Lu Benji did not know that the children were thinking about his magic. He turned around and asked enthusiastically, Which child has ever played with a small racing car that can run with a battery? However, when the children heard his question, they were all stunned and looked up at him in confusion. After all, they were all girls. Even Nan Xiaoyu had never played with racing cars before. His family had very few toys, and he had been reciting poems for fun since he was young. However, she reacted before the awkward silence. She happily raised her little arms as if she was worried that someone would steal the car from her. She hurriedly replied, Uncle Lu, I know. My brother has a small racing car like this. I have played with it before. Tong Tong, who was betrayed by his sister, did not react at all. He was lying on his father's shoulder and squinting his eyes sleepily. His listless expression showed that he had seen and played so much that he was tired after being busy the whole morning. I'm so sleepy. Let's sleep for a while. Sister, don't disturb me. Lu Benji snapped his fingers and smiled. Then do you know how our little racing car runs? She could not answer this time. The little girl was a little embarrassed as she twisted her little butt and said, "Hee, I don't know either." It didn't matter. Soon, Lu Benji called the children over to a large wooden basin. A simple wooden boat was placed on top of the water. Of course, the simple here referred to its simple structure. The skillful carpenters had carved this small wooden boat into the feeling of a dragon boat. Even the small embossments on the side of the boat were very delicate. Look, this small wooden boat is made from the engine of our toy racing car. The one connected to the propeller in the middle is our engine. Lu Benji took out the palm-sized wooden boat and introduced it to the little guys. In a while, we'll invite a child to come and install a battery here, okay? Nan Xiaoyu was chosen as the first kid to eat crabs. Who asked him to be the only little boy? But Nan Xiaoyu was a little scared. He held the battery and showed an eager expression for a while, then nervously retracted his hand. He looked at Lu Benji worriedly and said, "Uncle Lu, I'm scared." "Don't be afraid. Its propeller is at both ends. You install the battery here. What's there to be afraid of?" Lu Benji said with a smile. Although he was scared, Nan Xiaoyu still mustered up his courage and put the battery on. The moment the second battery was installed, the small engine began to hum, giving Nan Xiaoyu a fright. He quickly retracted his hand. But the other children cheered in surprise because the engine drove the propeller at both ends and spun like a big windmill. She looked at Nan Xiaoyu with envy. She also wanted to be selected for the experiment. As a participant and as a spectator, the experience would be very different, right? Then, the small boat on the water, relying on the engine to drive the propeller to sail quickly. This made the little guys cheer for a while. But this was only an appetizer. It was not a magical toy at all. Lu Benji only used this as an introduction. He took the children to the table in the laboratory and let them sit on the high stools so that they could easily watch the experiment on the table. "When I went out this morning, your aunt prepared a boiled egg for me. She said that if you were hungry, you could peel it and eat it." Lu Benji conjured an egg like a magic trick. He smiled and said to the little guys, "But I suddenly had a magical idea. Can I hold the egg and spin it?" "Spin it." She and the other children looked at Uncle Lu in confusion. They did not understand what he meant. So, Lu Benji took the egg and spun it on the table like a top. In the end, it still could not stand up. Soon, it lay down again and spun irregularly. "Come, try it. See if you can make it spin in this upright position." Lu Benji smiled and handed the egg to the children so that they could play with it. When it was Shi's turn, the little girl also pinched the small head of the egg with interest. She had seen her friends spin it just now. None of them succeeded. In order to be able to stand up and show her friends how amazing she was, the little girl held back her strength and spun the egg very hard. This time, it would definitely stand up. She watched with confidence. However, she used too much strength. Not only did the egg not spin, but it also flew out like a bottle knocked over by a bowling ball. She covered her mouth with her two little hands and exclaimed. The egg flew past Lon Xian, who was caught off guard, and rolled down. With a "pa" sound, it shattered on the ground. She was scared out of her wits. She felt that she had done something terrible. She had broken the egg that Aunt Lu had cooked for Uncle Lu. She blamed herself in her heart and turned to look at her father in a fluster. There was no need to mention how helpless her pitiful little eyes were. However, this time, her father did not need to save her. Lon Xian reacted. She turned around and jumped down from the stool to pick up the egg. She took a few glances at it, then patted the broken eggshell and blew off the dust. She handed it over and said to Lu Benji happily, "Uncle Lu, don't worry. It's still edible. It's just that the shell is broken." When she heard that, she turned her head and looked over anxiously. Indeed, a hard-boiled egg was a lot harder. After falling off the table, only the shell was cracked and a little flattened. However, the eggshell was still wrapped around the egg, so it didn't crack completely. Furthermore, it had been appraised by Lan Xin, so there was definitely no problem. Even if there was a problem, Lu Benji would not be calculative with the children. Moreover, the story behind this egg was made up by him. Haha, it's okay, it's okay. It's just an egg. Let's put it aside. Lu Benji said with a smile. He put the egg back into the plastic bag and continued to put it in his pocket. Then, he moved over a small device made of polished wood on the table. Below was a box. On the outside, there were switches, knobs, indicator lights, and so on. On the top was a round plate with beautiful wood grains printed on it. It was also extremely beautiful. Seeing that she was not blamed, she calmed down a little. She could not help but ask softly, "What is this?" You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.